and those that are reasonably anticipated by the chair. Votes may be taken as a result of these discussions. For everybody's information, Chairman Richard Bursch is participating remotely, so all our votes tonight will be via roll call votes. Not all items listed may in fact be discussed, and other items not listed may be brought up for discussion to the extent permitted by the open meeting law. First order is to take a attendance. Richard Bursch.
Present.
Todd Dwyer, I'm present. Bob Pease is not here at this moment. Katie Childs.
Present.
Carl Luck.
Present.
Jack Rabbit.
Present.
Ken Jones.
Here.
Carl will not be able to make it. Bob.
Yep. Any announcements or comment from the commission? Jack.
Okay. I'd like to report with regard to our stormwater management planning activities. It's been quite a last couple of weeks. Essentially, we've been able to solicit bids for the phase 2 of our stormwater project from 2 different concerns, the Woodward and Curran, as well as the Comprehensive Environmental Incorporated Group. We've had a chance to look at the bids, and we've been able to select the Comprehensive Environmental Incorporation with regard to going ahead and preliminary looking. Our first round of reviews was essentially their capabilities of what they could do and what the kind of homework they had done to come in and meet with us. And the second one was actually a financial bid breaking down the different sections. So it was very well received. We also, for those folks that may or not be aware, there's also the Lunenburg Stormwater Management Plan that was generated by DCI, our earlier contractors who looked at the phase 1. The report is actually pretty illuminating in that essentially they were able to look at the total number of outfalls with regard to, streams, culverts, dumping into our lakes. And it's worthy of a look. It essentially, we were able to isolate the fact that we have 238 municipal outfalls into the various water bodies in town. At the top of the list was 78 was Hickory Hills. Believe it or not, right behind it was Pearl Brook. And that's kind of interesting in that we're not hearing a lot of noise about Pearl Brook. The reason being is probably nobody's swimming in it, nobody's using it, but it is, it is receiving a tremendous amount of outfall from our town, and we need to be looking at that pretty hard. Lake Shirley had 59, Wayham 23, Baker Brook 11, and Massapog 3. So it was a very illuminating report. Within the report, they also looked at water quality with regard to the lakes in our town, and they characterize them by 1 through 5. 1 through 3 is it's totally drinkable, no problem. 4, you have some issues. 5, you have a water body that needs treatment and to be addressed. Within that, they looked at Hickory Hills was a 4A, which means that the water really isn't drinkable. But the reality is it's suffering from mercury in the fish tissue, as are just about every lake in this part of the world because of the atmospheric contribution of mercury into the water. So if you catch a lot of fish, I wouldn't recommend you eat a lot of them. It's not really the best thing to be doing. Lake Shirley in this particular case was rated a Lake 5. And I went back and just also verified their data points with regard to what the state was saying in terms of limited waters requiring a TMDL treatment. And essentially they identified Lake Shirley as a 5. And they pointed out that there's a Eurasian water milfoil problem, there's a non-native aquatics plants problem. In fact, our observations have been that a considerable amount of the naturally occurring vegetation within Lake Shirley has been removed, a considerable amount. And we can get you more data on that. They've also identified that there's harmful algae blooms occurring on a regular basis. There's obviously mercury in the fish. There's an oxygen problem. It's dissolved oxygen within the water. And that precipitated some of our earlier conversations with regard to looking at oxygen, especially during the winter, and its effects on fish. And lastly, the turbidity issue. They noted the water had a high level of turbidity, and most likely it's because of all the boat traffic that's going in and kicking it up. So in this case, they identified Hickory Hills as needing work, even though there's nothing they can really do about it, and Lake Shirley to be addressing, and we working with Lake Shirley to address those issues, the turbidity, the oxygen, and the harmful algae blooms, and the non-native aquatic plants. So that's the reason that's consistent with what we've observed, and it's consistent with our approach with regard to stormwater, as well as how we work with Lake Shirley Improvement Corporation. The reports are there, they're there for your edification.
Where will they be, Jack?
Okay, you can go to Mass DEP and pull them up, but at the same time, I've sent a copy of this report to Matt, and actually, I think Matt, you were saying you'd printed up a copy and make that available. This is all tying in. We have to take action, and the stormwater programs are coming together. Every one of our lakes and streams needs some work, and that's where we need to be going as a town, united as a town. So
Thanks, Jack.
that's my report. Thank you.
Any other comments from the commission? If we have no other comments from the commission, any comments from the public? Please come up, have a seat, and give us your name and address. Speak into the microphone. We're televised, sir.
My name is Joel Swenson, 17 Ruth Street. I find this analysis very intriguing because I was the person that asked the question that was trying to solicit this answer during the time period where we had police come to one of your Conservation Commission meetings. And nobody seemed to have that information when I asked the question. If you guys have had this information all the time, it's very intriguing that the chairman didn't have the ability to produce that answer. You, sir, didn't have the ability to produce that answer. You didn't have the chance to produce that answer.
Sir,
or you.
Sir, please address your comments to the chair.
You didn't have the ability to produce that answer. Instead, the chairman chose to ignore my question outright. And as I listened to that meeting, all you guys stated verbally and audibly in that meeting that you make all these decisions for clarity. It wasn't what you just said. It wasn't any of what you just said. So I find that extremely convenient that you've had this amount of time to produce this answer. And it would have been really good for the chairman. You guys worked for 222 days to amend the order of conditions. And the one time I asked the answer, you didn't have the ability to actually answer it. So it's very convenient.
Point taken,
and that's
sir.
my public comment.
Great.
Thank you.
Point taken, sir. As Commissioner Rabbit indicated, we're going to make those documents available for you to review.
Yeah.
And we're also going to discuss further some of the issues with Lake Shirley further in the meeting. So I invite, if you have additional comments at that time, please come up and voice your opinion. Thank you. Any other public comment? There's no additional public comment. Then I will get to our first appointment with Jack Roddick.
Actually, before we do that, Jack said it was okay. Could we have 4 Townsend Harbor Road come up and finish his presentation because he's got to be at another commission meeting?
Okay, so we want to open our first hearing for 4 Townsend Harbor Road. All right, we can do that. So pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 131, Section 40 as amended in the Town of Lunenburg Wetlands, the Wetlands Protection Act and the Town of Lunenburg bylaws, we will have a continued public hearing for notice of intent for demolition of sheds in a barn with a new bar constructed with land grading within the buffer zone at 4 Townsend Harbor Road. Sir, if you can state your name for the record.
Engineering Design Consultants. So I was here about a month ago for the previous meeting, and during that we discussed what we had presented as part of our notice of intent, where we had proposed an erosion control barrier and then activities in your 30-foot buffer. The agreement was that we would meet with your consultant out at the site. He and I did meet, and what we did is we found ties to limits of improvements that have been there. I mean, there's manicured lawn up to this point. So what I've done is I've identified by a tie distance to the building. We've got 28 feet here, we've got 39 feet here, and we've got 37 feet here, to limits that exist. This limit here is actually tying to the 30-foot buffer. What we're proposing to do is put the 12-inch compost sock that we had originally proposed at that position that's been established out at the site, and then put boulders 10 feet on center, so that there's no ability to then go past that point in the future. So these are limits that already exist at the site. This would then allow the homeowner who's trying to restore the site and then tear down this barn and construct a new barn to put one back in its position, but then to have marked out where you can basically do anything on the site, and that's it.
Okay.
And put it down for the record. And so Matt and I looked at the site, and also you asked about trees.
Yes.
By inventory, there were no trees cut in the 30-foot buffer. There were trees cut beyond that, but then those would be then finished. But there were no trees that we could see cut inside of that area as part of that activity.
And this is the delineated line?
Yes, sir.
Right here, huh?
Well, no, sir, this is the delineated
Because there
wetland
were
line.
trees that were taken down.
Yes, sir.
This whole area.
I don't disagree.
Yeah.
They're in the upland area beyond the 30-foot protected buffer zone. So all I'm saying is that they would have, had they gone through the process properly, would have had a permit from you, would have had no issues with it. I came to you for a permit after the fact. Again, I'm sorry, they went ahead, did work without a permit, but they would have secured one. And now what we're doing is putting in a permanent, established work limit. So they will not go beyond it. But yes, sir, there were trees cut in this area, but they are up,
They're out of
well
30 foot,
upland.
really?
They're in the 100. No, sir, they're in the
Oh, I
100.
appreciate that, yeah.
But I'm just saying they're not in the 30.
Because I looked and said, wow, okay.
No, I went out and walked the sidewalk.
Okay.
We looked at the area closely.
So it just, this makes the most sense, because now you're gonna put a permanent barrier in, there's just, once, and I sent an email to Matt, so what I'm basically saying is, to start the work, we use S&M Construction to put our erosion control barriers in. So we've already staked it out, so we've already got everything out here. I just have to make some adjustments in these areas that we looked at yesterday. S&M would put that ECB in. I call Matt, Matt comes out to take a look at it. Then we'd come out to do the rest of our work. Then Matt would get an as-built from us, showing all these boulder locations. Can close out that certificate, the barn will go up, they will do no other work in that area. Permanent work limit
Are
zone.
they regrading it all?
Just a small amount right here, sir. There's a little bit of a depression right through there, and we did identify that. It's
So
about
what's
a
the
foot and a half
amount?
of grade.
So you have about a
About
foot and a half of
of
fill?
grade, right.
Okay.
It's very small, but we just wanted to make this work effort done once, stabilize the area, and then
So the
be done.
regrading area, you're going to revegetate with grass?
Yes. Yes.
I totally agree it'd be an improvement of what we got right now.
It's just chaos right now,
Yeah.
and I think that by doing it this way and putting them 10 feet on center, there's just no way someone's going to be able to argue that they've gone, that they properly went past something. You're going to have a permanent record of this as part of this
What was the boulder
application.
size, sir?
I did not establish one, but they have access to large boulders. I mean, I would say nothing less than 2 foot in diameter. You know, we want to put a good-sized boulder up.
Erosion control for around when you do the demolition of the barn?
Yes, sir, it's all right
It's in
here.
there. So the yellow lines as well?
That's
Okay.
going to be compost sock.
Okay.
12-inch, which is way beyond what we need. The point was is that there's going to be a rise in the grade, there's going to be a boulder.
Right.
The compost sock just sits there, it's going to live there.
And have they cleaned up the debris behind the house? Because they were
Yes, sir.
doing work
That's
outside, inside that.
Agreed. All this gets cleaned up.
Okay.
But we couldn't do anything until we got an order of conditions from you.
Any butters?
We didn't have any at the last meeting, so I don't expect any, but you can open it up. You did that
Any
at the
other
last meeting.
questions from the commissioners?
I don't have any questions.
Any comment from the public on Ford Townsend Harbor Road? If there are no public comment, I'll accept a motion for a standard order of conditions with a caveat that the boulders will be placed 10 foot on center along the 30-foot wetland boundary, the 30-foot buffer boundary at...
As noted.
As noted on the plan, and the boulders will be not less than 2 feet approximately in diameter.
So move.
Second. I have motion and a second. Roll call vote. Richard Birch.
Yes.
Jack Rabbit.
Yes.
Ken Jones. Aye. Carl Luck.
Aye.
Katie Childs.
Aye.
I vote aye as well.
Great, thank you very much, appreciate your time.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you.
Hey, I'll take these for now. You can correct the note on the
Do we have someone from DPW, is Jack Roddickman's here to address the culvert replacements?
Jack, come on up.
There you go. Hi, Jack. Good.
Good crowd. How are you?
Good. Why don't you tell us what you have going on?
Here's one, Jack.
I propose to replace two culverts, two separate parts of the community. One on Sunset Lane between number 76 and 85. If you're not familiar with Sunset Lane, it's about, I don't know, half a mile from Robs Hill Road intersection coming back towards town.
Which one is that, Jack? The one you have now? Should say at the bottom corner to your right.
Sunset Lane.
Okay.
And this was an area that gave us trouble all winter. When the road was built, the culvert itself was undersized. It was never really the appropriate design. That was quite a while ago. And the pipe had rotted in the invert, and mock or debris, organics had risen on the uphill side. So all those things put together, the pipe didn't function very well this year. And we spent, literally hundreds of man hours cleaning it out, because if we didn't during the wet time, and it was a wet season, the water would come right out over the road. So for funding sources, we use some of the debt exclusion drainage money, and what I propose to do is just remove that pipe, put in a larger pipe. Very simple, not extend it. I mean, maybe an inch or two in the overall, shorter or longer, but there won't be any additional work done. There will be the head wall will change on both ends. There won't be any trees cut. There won't be any additional work on the bankings. Guardrails will be taken out and replaced. And at the conclusion of the project, there are two catch basins, one on either side of the roadway, and the placement of those catch basins didn't line up with the paving. So, I mean, typically you put the catch basins in the low spot. It didn't quite work out with the design. So when we break back the paving, we'll go back far enough so that when we come down into the dip, those catch basins will be in the dip. They didn't function very well.
So are you replacing the basins?
No.
No.
We don't have. We'll just change the grade,
Okay.
the road profile. It's literally plucking out that pipe, putting in a bigger pipe.
Okay.
That's one. The other, on the other side of town, Northfield Road at the New West Townsend intersection. This is a much larger pipe. This has been on the docket for quite some time. I kept trying to figure out a way to do it without blocking the road. Did research on, sleeving it and pouring concrete around it and doing some different things, but every season, and it's been 2 seasons, you lose that window, because no matter what you do there, you interrupt or potentially interrupt the bus traffic. And so both of these projects need to be initiated and completed by August 27th, which is the first day of school, as I understand it. The other's been designed for some time, as has this one, and it really went on the shelf waiting for school to close. Got no attention from me whatsoever. And why I'm here is because there's clearly a misstep and a miscommunication with the consultant. He didn't come to this board, this commission, and I didn't know that until we had our pre-construction meeting. Now, I'm not going to throw him under the bus. I'm going to take full responsibility for that, because it's my job. What should have been done, could have been done, whatever, wasn't done. But let me get back to the Northfield Road to explain that. Much larger culvert pipe from about 5 o'clock to 8 o'clock and the bottom's totally gone. It's so large, excuse me, that it doesn't back up.
Is it concrete corrugated pipe?
It's corrugated pipe, corrugated steel, so it's rusted out, all scoured out right to the gravel. And again, we pull that out, no additional work on the uphill or the downhill side. Pull out the guardrails, replace it, and put everything back just the way it is, hopefully, and never to notice it. But again, the reason why I'm here is because when we had the pre-construction meeting, it became evident that we missed this very valuable step. And instead of going ahead with the job, which I think, well, not only is it against the law, but I think it would have been discourteous to this board, to the town as a whole. Spoke to Matt. Unfortunately, this meeting was fairly close, so I still have that window. So it comes down to this. It comes down to being allowed to get the okay from you here to move forward. And if that's not possible, because of the mistake that was made, we go into August, or whatever you need, then we'll continue with the process, but we'll have to put it off till next year.
So the plans you brought with you, do they detail the proposed construction plan, the erosion protection you have planned on the
Yes.
site and all that?
Yes.
Can you take us through the erosion protection, things like that, briefly?
Yeah, the hay bales and silt fence.
Yep.
On the downhill side, and hay bales and silt fence on the uphill side. I mean, I can't oversimplify it. I can't make it more technical than it really is, but it's a very, some are more difficult. This is not that difficult.
What sort of length will you put? What's the stretch of erosion protection you'll have? Is it going to be 30 feet, 50 feet or so of
You know what,
erosion
I
protection?
don't have that off the top of my head. If you're familiar with the intersection. Matt, can you help me with this?
Yeah, go ahead. Which one is that?
This is Sunset Lane.
All right, do you want Sunset or Northfield? Which one are you explaining right now?
Yeah, let's go through Northfield since
I was gonna say,
or,
you've got
Sunset.
Northfield.
He's got Sunset. Let's just look at that one by one. See if we can pull it right out of the notes. So the commission's got the information that we need.
Silt sock, that's in the catch basin. You see district area, Sunset Lane, concrete, so, all they show here are the silt socks in the catch basins. I don't see anything else on this one.
Okay.
Mostly because the construction is going through. We have, on the downhill side, I don't know if you recall, but our department was helpful. It was a 319 grant, and this is all full of plantings and, what do you call those things? Wheat, hobbles, the things that are straw, what are they called?
Straw wattle?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's an S, a very tight S, or a couple of S's here
Okay.
that protects everything, and the vegetation filled in, and so that's the best erosion control you could get. Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, through you. Jack, first of all, good job on the public outreach the other night, on the selectmen.
What's that? The detour?
The detour.
I think the detour is the most.
Yeah, I don't think you were ever trying to hide anything. You were telling the whole town, and I thought that was really good. The question that I had, aside from the fact that, God, did you see that, was that you've been real helpful with us in terms of plunge basements at the end of any kind of ravine.
Yeah.
With riprap and
Yeah,
such.
a lot of those on Hickory Hills.
Yeah, and they work really well. And I know that, is there any, because if I remember right, it kind of takes off downhill pretty steep after it goes past. And I'm wondering if you could somehow consider some sort of a plunge basin or something just to slow it down as it moves across the street and just hold it a little bit. So a little bit of kind of designed to slow
You mean
that.
at the top end?
The bottom end.
The bottom end? Well,
Yeah, I see you got that temporary controls, and that stuff breaks down over time.
Well, that was some years ago, but that was through a 319 grant where other things were accomplished around Lake Shirley. That was supposed to provide a permanence there, where it is there and it gets overgrown.
Yeah.
And what it guards against is that flow of water that you mentioned, that rush water, just flowing down through that alleyway right into the lake. So it
Right.
slows the water down, bounces it around a little bit, lets it settle out. If there was room
Could you?
between that and the pipe, I don't see there'd be any problem.
Because
to-
the major water events that we're having are increasing. You know, they've increased like 60, 70% in the last 10 years.
Yeah,
More
I
than a
think-
1-inch event.
I'm
And you were
painfully
well
aware
aware of
of
that,
that,
yeah. And so those types of diversions are going to hold up a little bit, but in a lot of big rain events, we probably should be thinking about something a little bit more
Yeah,
permanent.
I'll do the NOI.
And perhaps constructing some sort of a pool with the riprap might be helpful in the long term. Maybe we look at that as a long-term strategy for all our stuff.
Sure, sure.
If you
It's-
could do-
I think
if
it's
you could
something we could
consider.
do after the fact, if you wanted to, or if you made it a condition of the job, we could do it while we're there, because it's so low.
I'll ask the engineer.
It's
Yeah.
so low. Well, he's not, and...
No,
yeah,
this
not the-
engineer, this
oh, this
engineer.
engineer.
This
This engineer, as you know, has left the employ of the town.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so that, not to make excuses, but that added to the confusion a little bit anyway.
Okay.
But again, it's my responsibility, it's my
Yeah,
my
you and
job.
Adrian, that's fine.
Yeah, we could. It would be difficult in this situation to clean it, however, because of the elevation from the road
Right.
to the proposed plunge pool, and because the bank is so steep, we wouldn't want to move ourselves down to the bank and loosen up the bank.
I
But
appreciate
it
it.
certainly could be done
Slow the velocity of
with,
the water down a little bit.
with a larger machine.
Yeah.
If that's what you'd like to see, I mean, that's nothing really, you don't even put, like we did at Hickory Hills, we don't like to put the riprap at the bottom of the
Right.
plunge pool, because then you end up just pulling the riprap out.
Right. You put it a little bit further
So basically,
down.
it's just a shaped hole with riprap up around the rim, if you would,
Yeah,
and so that when you get in there to excavate the silt that has collected,
yeah.
You're
It's
not
it's
pulling
at
out
the
all the
base.
stone, yeah.
And in the meantime, you're turning the force of the water, and you're putting actually the energy into the embankment and the rock, so that's.
well,
that was
it's
a
sort of like a splash rock or something.
Yeah.
It's so, here's the
Yeah.
direction of the water, and it falls and
Take a
loses
look
some
at it. If you-
velocity.
Yeah. You're an engineer for all practical
Well,
purposes, so, but you might think about that.
I will.
So, erosion protection, the silt socks are shown on each of the plans. Based on the agent's input, I know both culverts are in terrible shape. And
Yeah, that's,
I would entertain a motion to give provisional approval to get started, with a caveat that a notice of intent that Matt will help prepare is filed for the August 7th meeting for us to fully consider, but these plans appear pretty complete to me. Carl, go
I just
ahead.
have one question, because that pool, along the pool thing that you're just talking about, I think it's a good idea. Do you think we can fit it in there without disturbing the Serpentine?
I think if we can't, we shouldn't install it.
Okay.
Because
Great,
regardless of
perfect.
whether I think we can, we're not standing there looking at it.
Right, right.
And it's not to be determined on the size. Maybe it's, more oblong, that's the
Mm-hmm.
value of it. We wouldn't want to disturb that, because even as you speak of that breaking down, you can see that even though the socks themselves might break down, they've created earth berms.
Right,
And
yeah.
the vegetation is taken up, so it's created little dams, and they're open to the right and open to the left, so as the water flows down, it hits that. It would slow further with the plunge pool, I agree, but it hits that and meanders through through that vegetation, and by the time it gets out to the end, it's much slower.
Right, yeah. Yeah, and I
Which is the
appreciate that,
idea.
you appreciate
Yeah.
that, but Jack, because that was a 319 grand, and it's meant to grow over, it's not meant to stand up, it's meant to vegetate and protect, and provide a serpentine to slow it down. So I wouldn't want to disturb that, but if we can fit something in front of
Yeah,
it, then all the
sure.
better, that's
Yeah,
great.
we wouldn't want to disturb that, and by all means, and I can, work with Matt on that, and let him know what we propose, and if he's in favor of it,
Yeah.
yeah, we'll get it in there, sure.
Ken?
Mr. Chairman, through you to Matt, I know that the Northfield Road one is a cold water fishery. Is there anything special we have to do because of that, or is that, there's no
On a
additional?
culvert replacement, I don't think so, but I'll
Okay.
ask DEP anyway.
Okay. No, I'm in favor of these, and I think we should, do everything we can do to proceed with them, this season if we can.
So I would make a motion that we approve the two proposals and I don't think there are any,
Provisional approval to get started
yeah.
with the acknowledgement that a formal NOI will be filed for the August.
That's what I meant to say. Thank you.
And
So
but,
we have a motion?
If I could comment,
Yes.
Jack, if you have a chance to take a look at between now and then, amend your motion, and if not, I'll support either one.
Sure, well, yeah, I appreciate it very much, and you know, I want to be very clear, it was never my intention to circumvent the process. There's no future in that. Lacks a tremendous amount of courtesy and respect. It's just, a mistake was made. And yes, but I'll work through Matt with that.
Okay,
And
thank
he
you.
can bring that to the commission.
We have a motion?
Second?
Did you ask anybody?
Second. Do we have any other commission comment? Do we have any comment from the audience? If there's no public comment, I'll take a roll call vote. Richard Birch?
Aye.
Katie Childs?
Aye.
Carl Luck?
Aye.
Ken Jones?
Aye.
Jack Rabbit?
Aye.
I vote aye as well.
I appreciate your support.
Thank you, Jack.
All right.
Thank you very, very much.
Thanks, Jeff.
Circumstances.
All right.
Jack, can you leave those there, because we're gonna need them for you. We can get together tomorrow.
Open our next hearing pursuant to Mass General Law,
We
Chapter...
have, before we open the hearing, we have this gentleman here who meant to come up for public comment, but he came in late,
Okay.
and he needed to ask the commission something.
Sure. Sir, we have an additional public comment. Gentleman wasn't able to get here when we started the meeting. Sir, why don't you come down and give us your name and address and let us know what you have to say?
Good evening. My name is Jonathan Heinberg, and I live at 331 Northfield Road. I was on the schedule to have a site visit this past Saturday, July 13th, but due to the injury of one of your members or a
That would
miscommunication.
have been me, I was out Saturday.
Okay, so it didn't happen. And what is going on at my home is I have a few structural issues of undetermined origin, so I'm trying to get to the bottom of what's causing it. I did have an architect come and look at the foundation. It's not a foundational issue, so I need to know how to proceed in order to let the contractor that I'm working with know how to continue.
I guess my first question for you, sir, is you indicated that you have a structural concern. In our view, if it's a structural concern, I don't think it...
Oh, it's more of
Oh,
a
no.
land concern.
Oh,
It's a land
sorry, I
concern.
should-
To me,
yeah,
he calls
I
it
can-
Structural,
I-
but there's, seems to be some type of a creeping water issue around his yard. He doesn't seem,
Right.
can't figure out where it's coming from. So I put him on the Saturday site walk list, figuring that maybe the commission could go down and give him some guidance as to what he needed to file.
Right. I can elaborate
Sure.
further. The contractor issued that I should maybe get a water table reading of my property. So I went to see Mr. Marrow this past week, and he said he didn't have that information for me. He didn't have a file on my property. So that's one possibility. But before that happens, he suggested the site walk. So that's when last Saturday was scheduled.
And we
So-
apologize for not making it.
Yeah.
We apologize then.
Okay.
for that.
I'm not quite sure how to proceed on this one. Have you gotten, well, you mentioned you had an architect. Did they give you an opinion on work they need to do to continue to study the problem and figure out what's going on? Or do they have a solution that they've proposed?
He basically told me that it was not a foundational issue, so he passed me back to my contractor. The contractor thinks it might be a grading issue with the land. I have a long ranch house with a very massive gutter system. I have those drain extension gutter things, and when it rains, I do have to empty those manually, otherwise the gutters will back up. So the fact that these gutter extensions are not draining on their own, although my property is on a fairly high rise, indicates to me that they go into some kind of a recess or dip. So I'm just trying to figure out how to fix my...
Is the property within the 100-foot buffer?
It looks like there might be riverfront associated, but I'm
Okay.
not certain.
Okay. I still think it makes sense to take a site walk out there. In fact, I think it might make more sense, Matt, if you have time in your schedule, maybe to get over to the site next week or later this week to take a look and give us your opinion on.
Well, I've got a sidewalk tomorrow morning at 11 with Carl. Figured maybe, Carl, you and I could go after.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Would tomorrow work for you, sir?
Yeah, tomorrow is fine. Okay.
Probably about, we'll say 12:30.
Right. And one additional question. You did indicate that it would just be external, but I thought it would be helpful to show you what's going on inside.
Are you getting seepage into your basement or something like that?
No,
or-
it's not in the basement. It's more on, the basement has a waterproofing system. It's more on the, well, it's a ranch house, so it's on the living level.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
Good, right?
So,
Yep. Yep.
okay.
Okay.
So tomorrow at 11?
12:30.
12:30.
Oh, 12:30.
Yes.
Okay. All right, thank you.
All right, thank you, sir. Let's open our next hearing pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 131, Section 40, as amended in the Town of Lunenburg Wetland Protection Municipal Bylaws. Pauline and Jason Zirkle have filed a request for determination of applicability for the placement of a dock at 379 Townsend Harbor Road. Good evening.
Hello.
Mr. Chairman, for the sake of clarity, while I'm not a direct abutter, I live within approximately 300 yards of the home, and they are personal friends. So at your discretion. Pardon?
Are you going to recuse yourself?
I would, if it would be appropriate, I would recuse myself.
You can.
Is that okay? They're good friends, I'm sorry.
All right.
Very good friends.
I haven't been out to visit the site, but you have a sketch with your application
Yes.
that'll pass around to the commission. Why don't you describe the proposed dock?
Basically, it's just a 4-foot wide by 2 10-foot sections, so 4 by 20 feet out. Just looking to be able to, put a couple of posts down on the 4 corners just to support it, so it doesn't drift around. It is on barrels, so it's floating, but we're just looking for a place to put our boat.
So is it going to be a removable dock, like
Yes,
the
it is.
aluminum docks?
Yep.
Okay, so
Yep,
your
it's-
footings are going to just sit on the lake bottom?
Pretty much,
You'll
yeah,
take
it's
it out
just,
and,
it's 4 like 2-inch round poles that are just gonna sit down, and then at the end of the season, they'll be removed.
And we already have talked with the Board of Directors of Hickory Hills. They've come out and looked and approved also.
Will you be doing any modifications to the land for the approach to the dock?
No,
No. Okay.
no, it'll be just a small ramp coming from the last section, just straight onto the land. There won't be anything permanent.
Any questions from the commissioners?
I may have mentioned, when I look at the print, there's a big bush shown here. Will that stay?
Yeah, the bush is kind of on the side, and the dock's just gonna go right along the edge of straight out into the cove.
Great. So there's no vegetation needed to be removed?
No.
What's the existing grade there? Is it fairly level or is it fairly steep?
It does pitch down.
Okay.
It's from,
Is there grass there or is it gravel or?
it's actually sand. There's our beach area is right
Okay.
there.
Okay.
So it'll just be kind of along the edge of the beach, right
Sure.
next to where that bush is.
Okay.
Any other questions from the commission? Any questions from the public? Without any additional questions? Rich, did you have a question?
Nope.
Without any additional questions, I'll accept a motion for a -3 determination.
That's good.
That's a good thing.
For the proposed dock at 379 Townsend Harbor Road.
So moved.
We have a motion, have a second?
Second.
Motion to second, roll call vote, Richard Birsch.
Aye.
Katie Childs.
Aye.
Carl Luck.
Aye.
Ken Jones.
Aye.
Jack Rabbit.
Recused?
And I vote aye as well. We're all set.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good job.
We will open our next hearing pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 131, Section 40, as amended at the Town of Lunenburg Wetlands Protection and Municipal Bylaws. Jeffrey and Angela Smith have filed a request for determination of applicability for construction of a swimming pool within the riverfront at 105 Reservoir Road.
That's cheating. That's cheating.
Hi, can you formally put your name and address?
Angela
Record.
Smith, 105 Reservoir Road.
And Jeffrey Smith, 105 Reservoir Road.
Thank you. What about our two other participants?
Can you say your name?
Aubrey?
Aubrey and Emma.
Emma.
All right.
Oh, beautiful little girls.
Now, girls, don't be afraid of the big bad man in the red shirt. He really isn't a bad guy. He's really a nice guy.
No, my name's Mr. Rabbit, like the bunny rabbit.
So why don't you guys tell us what you have planned?
So what we're looking to do is construct an above-ground swimming pool in our backyard of 105 Reservoir Road. As you can see in the green, that is the
It's already cleared.
developed area. It's grass in our backyard, and we're looking to just construct a pool in that area. So I know
Pool and deck.
there's a lot of conservation in the back.
There is going to be a deck involved too.
Yes.
Even though you're not doing it right now, you got to declare the deck because it's on the application.
That's correct, yeah. So the deck is not going in right away. Might go in next month, might go in next year, not sure yet. But we wanted to make that known.
Your approval's good for 3 years.
Okay.
Very good.
We're looking to add an extension to the existing deck that would go down to a pool level. Everything will be in the cleared lot. We're not touching any trees or anything.
And is the
Actually,
pool?
under state regulation, it's exempt.
Yeah.
Under our bylaw, we're hearing the RDA, but under state regulation, that project would be exempt.
Okay. Comments from the commissioners?
Why don't we?
No, I just have an educational question. Why is it exempt?
Under 310 CMR, under minor projects exemptions, an above-ground swimming pool, or even an in-ground swimming pool, in the outer riparian zone, greater than 50 feet from either the edge of wet or the edge of river, whichever is farther. If there's no conversion of trees, like you're not taking trees and cutting it down, you're just putting within existing grass, it's exempt.
Excellent. Thank you.
Okay.
It's like educating.
I like that. Well stated.
Great. If there's
Same thing with the deck. The deck and the pool would be
Okay.
exempt, under state law.
No comments.
By law, that's why you're here.
Any additional comments from the commissioners?
Just signature on the document. Your signature.
Yeah, actually,
plan?
I think I have one with it, but I haven't signed another one anyway.
Yeah.
Sign whatever, either one. You
Any
can sign that one,
comments
that's a
from the
good one.
public?
We'll give you more.
On 105 Reservoir Road. I see no comments from the public. I will accept a motion for a -3 determination.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second, that's a good thing, -3. Roll call vote, Richard Birsch. Aye. Jack Rabbit.
Aye.
Ken Jones.
Aye.
Carl Luck.
Aye.
Katie Childs.
Aye.
And I vote aye as well. Thank you. You're all set.
Enjoy your
Thank you.
pool.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thanks.
Very nice.
Matt. All right.
Yeah.
You want to skip over, come back to enforcement and jump right into your business?
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, honestly, all of those are status quo. The only thing I have to report is that the Crawford Street one will be, they filed a notice of intent. They'll be on the August 7th agenda.
Okay. So under enforcement, as Matt just said, the only new item we have is 134 Crawford Street, and they're going to file a notice of intent that will be heard at the August 7th meeting.
And I have one more really quick that I need you guys to vote and sign and ratify. It's not on the agenda, it just came to our attention today. And I've started an enforcement ticket, I emailed you about it. 127 Pleasant Street, right next to 101, started a wall and a driveway and grading in the buffer zone without any approvals. So I'm going to send an enforcement order and have them retroactively filed.
Okay.
That's all.
Did you issue a ticket, or?
I haven't issued anything yet, that's why it just came to our attention this morning.
Okay.
So I figured I'd get you guys to just sign the enforcement order.
Right. Have you had a chance to go out and see it, Matt?
Yeah,
Okay, and it's
it's in the buffer zone.
inside the 100 or 50 or 30? Or?
I'd say probably closer to the 50, but probably not inside.
Okay.
And for enforcement, that's it. We can go into everything else later if you want.
So what do we
Want
say?
to take a look at that before we,
No.
essentially pretty straightforward what Matt said.
Yeah.
Paragraph 2.
Matt, is it just one signature page on this?
Yes.
So we need to take a vote on it?
You should vote to ratify, please.
All right, I'll accept let's take a vote to ratify the proposed enforcement order for 127 Pleasant Street. Roll call vote, Richard Bursch.
Aye.
Katie Childs.
Aye.
Carl Luck.
Aye.
Ken Jones.
Aye.
Jack Rabbit.
Aye.
I vote aye as well. All right.
Thank you.
Moving right along, we're going to get to new business. So we're going to discuss the proposed response to open meeting law. And Town Attorney Adam Costa's got some comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. For the record, Adam Costa, Town Council, with me, Tellerman and Costa. Thanks for having me tonight, making time on your agenda. So I've got documents for you. These are, so by way of background, there were 4 separate open meeting law complaints that were filed. So there's a process that exists under the open meeting law. You may be familiar with it. It was a process that didn't exist until just a few years ago when they recodified the law. And the process is comprised of any individual, any resident, non-resident who believes that there has been a violation of the open meeting law by a public body can file a complaint with that public body. And it's on a form that is prescribed by the Division of Open Government, which is a new division that was created when the statute was recodified. And so the first step is to file that complaint. The public body that has received the complaint then has 14 business days to respond to that complaint. And the response can be an admission that there has been a violation and consistent with that acknowledgement, some effort to try and rectify the violation. It can be a denial that a violation has occurred if it's believed that there was no violation and an explanation as to why there has been no violation. Once that response is provided within the 14 business days to the complainant then has 2 options. The complainant can be satisfied that the public body has either taken what they call remedial action to cure the defect, or can be satisfied that there has been no violation based upon the explanation that was provided by the public body and can take the matter no further. Or if the complainant is dissatisfied, the complainant can then file the complainant's original complaint together with a copy of the response received with the Division of Open Government, and the Division of Open Government will then perform a further review and will issue a decision, a determination as to whether there has in fact been a violation, and can determine whether there is an additional remedy that ought to occur. Sometimes, most often that remedy is a strict warning to the public body not to do it again. There is the ability under the statute to go so far as to impose fines. Again, that happens from time to time, but usually in cases of repeat violations and things of that sort. So in this instance, there were 4 complaints, as I referenced, that were received. All 4 of these complaints were with respect to your May 29th meeting. We'll go through each of them individually, and I prepared proposed responses to each of them for your consideration. But there is a similarity, at least among 3 of the 4 complaints, that they principally, not entirely, but principally relate to the fact that, and you obviously know that it was a fairly contentious meeting. I'm not going to relive it for you or recharacterize it or anything of that sort, but bottom line is toward the latter part of the meeting, there was a police presence. The meeting was concluded, or words to that effect were stated on the record. Residents, others who were in attendance, were essentially ushered out of the meeting room and outside of the building. And at that point, there was a resuming of the meeting. There was a brief discussion of the topic that was then underway, which was the LSIC's request for an extension of its order of conditions for the treatment of Lake Shirley. That was a very brief discussion, and then it transitioned to a discussion of the only other item that was on your agenda that night, which was your regulation review, which has been underway for some time. So that was the substance of the complaint, that should not have occurred. And then there were some other issues that were raised in the complaints as well. So what I'd like to do, and I'll try to do so efficiently, I know you've got other items on your agenda tonight, is just to walk through these 4 complaints. Again, there's some similarities, so I can do so quickly, and to explain for you what's been done. And it occurs to me that I think I've got another file in my briefcase, so let me get up for just a moment and I'll get the draft proposals. So the purpose of this review is when an open meeting law complaint is received and a response is prepared, the public body is required to vote on the issuance of the response. So the objective here would be to walk through the complaint and to then walk through the proposed response. So I've got copies here.
Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Adam.
And I'll say for the benefit of the public that obviously this being a document that has been introduced in a public meeting, it is a public document, so certainly subsequent to tonight's meeting, copies will be available. I'll also say that the intention would be to vote on this document tonight such that by tomorrow there's a final version of it that'll actually be sent out to the complainant and will also be a public record. So I'm going sort of in reverse order here because this was the latest of the complaints received, but maybe the simplest to address, at least in my opinion. So this is a complaint that was received from Marilyn Jewell. The complaint was received on July 9th. The complaint again addresses the May 29, 2019 meeting, indicates that there was an agenda item regarding the amendment to LSIC's order of conditions for the treatment of Lake Shirley, and there are concerns with respect to the manner in which that meeting was conducted and the manner in which that meeting concluded. The relief that's sought, there's a question on the form that says, what action do you want the public body to take in response to your complaint? And the request is, as a taxpayer of Lunenburg, I request that Mr. Bursch be taken off the commission, the board, or resign. Also, Mr. Bursch spends months in Florida each year and is in attendance by video only. So that's the concern that was raised and the relief that was sought. You'll see from the proposed response that I've got here, and again, I do hate to elevate form over substance, but we've got to comply with the law here, much as a complainant does in responding to these. The issue here is that this response, this complaint rather, was received after the deadline for complaints to be made following an incident. The law is interpreted very strictly by the Division of Open Government. The division requires that complaints be made within 30 days after the event occurs. There is a minor exception to that rule in a circumstance, for example, where a public body might discuss something in executive session, so it couldn't possibly be known within 30 days. That 30-day clock would then tend to run from the date when it becomes public. But in this circumstance, the meeting was a public meeting. The concern related to what occurred at that public meeting, and in fact, there were 3 other complaints received within the 30-day deadline. In this case, it was not. So you'll see from my proposed response here that without really addressing the substance of the complaint, I've simply said that the statute hasn't been satisfied, and so much as the Division of Open Government would decline to review it, we're not going to respond to it either. In this case in particular, maybe more so than the average case, I don't have too much difficulty elevating form over substance, because the reality is these same complaints that are made in this particular complaint are going to be addressed in the context of the next 3 we're going to discuss, because they all speak about the same meeting and the same sorts of events that occurred. So that's my recommended response with respect to this complaint. And I defer to you, Mr. Chairman, as to whether you want to vote these one at a time or ask questions one at a time, or whether you'd like me to walk through all 4 of them.
Let's open it to questions from the commission, and then we can open it to questions from the public on each complaint one at a time, and then we'll vote one at a time. Any questions from the commission on the proposed draft response?
No.
None. Any questions or comments from the public on the proposed draft response to this first complaint? Yes, ma'am. Please come up and give your name and address.
We just can't hear back here. We cannot hear back here.
I will try and raise my voice. If you have any public comment that you'd like to discuss, then please come forward, but thank you for that. I will try and raise my voice so you can better hear. We got a full house tonight, something we're not used to, at least until recently. So with that, I will accept a motion to accept the draft response for the complaint from Marilyn Jewell.
So moved.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Motion and second. Roll call vote. Richard Bursch.
Aye.
Katie Childs.
Aye.
Carl Luck.
Aye.
Ken Jones.
Aye.
Jack Rabbit.
Aye.
I vote aye as well.
Thank you.
Please note that Commissioner Bob Pease has joined the meeting. Hi, Bob.
So thank you again, Mr. Chairman, for Mr. Pease's benefit. We're in the process of reviewing the responses to the open meeting law complaints that were received relative to the Commission's May 29th meeting. So the second one that we'll review, in fact, was the first one that was received. It was received by the town on June 18th, again relates to the May 29th meeting. This was received from Joanna Bellotta, who I know is in attendance tonight. Again, it relates to that meeting. It relates to the manner in which the meeting was conducted. Also relates to the issue of lack of public discussion or deliberation of the request by LSIC for an extension of the order of conditions and the general discussion that was had by the commission in that regard. The request, what action do you want the public body to take in response to your complaint? The response to that question in the complaint was the public is owed an apology for the way they were treated. The commission should receive training in the open meeting law. The appointing authority should consider these events in the context of the chair's reappointment, and the commission should consider, in light of this behavior, whether to remove him as chair. So I'm going to spend some time reviewing this response because you'll see that the substance of the next two complaints is substantially the same, and so the response is substantially the same with a minor edit. So you'll see here it's a fairly extensive response. It goes on for the better part of 3 pages. Much of this is just sort of a recollection or overview of what occurred at the May 29th meeting. So I indicate in the first paragraph on page 1 that I've been assigned to review the matter on behalf of the commission, that I conducted an investigation which included at a minimum a review of the audio recording from that May 29th meeting, which was available on the town's website. I consulted with the commission's chairman, Mr. Bursch, and also had an opportunity to review the police department incident report that was created as a consequence of that meeting. Based upon that review, the determination that I have made is that there was indeed, it is my opinion, that there was indeed a violation of the open meeting law that occurred, and specifically that violation occurred when the commission cleared the meeting room and then continued its discussion on a matter that was within the jurisdiction of the board. That sort of deliberation falls within the definition of meeting under the open meeting law. So notwithstanding certain factors that I've acknowledged here, which is why the meeting room was cleared, that there were individuals who were raising their voice. There was a bit of a back and forth between members of the public and the commission. So I understand the need to sort of calm things a bit, but by ordering individuals out of the room and then continuing the meeting, had you adjourned the meeting at that time, that would have been the appropriate thing to do. But by continuing the meeting, you engaged in deliberation under the definition in the open meeting law, which constitutes a violation. The recommended recourse or remedy that I have made in the letter, and sort of telling because it's already on your agenda for tonight, because I asked Mr. Morrow to place it on the agenda and I conferred with the chair, is the sort of remedial action that I had referenced before. The Division of Open Government has recognized that from time to time violations do exist, and they have allowed public bodies to undertake remedial action, which in a circumstance where something is discussed that shouldn't have been discussed because maybe it wasn't properly on the agenda, or a meeting is conducted that shouldn't have been conducted because maybe it hasn't been properly posted or noticed, or as was the case here, the meeting room was emptied or cleared, then what typically occurs is that gets placed onto the agenda for a future meeting, and it's a redo for the public body. The body would then discuss the same sorts of things, maybe in somewhat of a summary form that it discussed behind closed doors or at an improperly noticed or posted meeting a second time, and provide opportunity for public comment or whatever the public body sees fit. So that's my recommendation here, and that's why the next two items on your agenda are the two items that were briefly discussed after the doors were closed, so to speak, at the May 29th meeting. You'll see here, so that sort of chronology of what occurred at the meeting and what my review disclosed is the better part of the first and second page, but beginning about halfway or 2/3 of the way down on the second page, I'm sorry, those are the agenda items. The third page, beginning in the second full paragraph on the third page, I acknowledge that there are some other complaints that are raised here, and the remainder of the documents submitted by Ms. Bellata. So there's a statement that appointing authority should consider these events in the context of the chair's reappointment, and speaks about the behavior of the chair and the commission generally, things of that sort. I appreciate that the complainant has these concerns. I'm not dismissing them or downplaying them. What I am saying is that what I've been tasked with is reviewing the complaint in the context of the open meeting law and preparing a response as to whether there has been a violation of the open meeting law. And the open meeting law is a law that is aimed at exactly that, ensuring that meetings are open to the public and are conducted in accordance with its provisions. It's not meant to address behavior of individual members or ethical issues or conflict issues. There are different laws in Massachusetts that address those things, and certainly individuals can bring those concerns to their municipalities, but in the context of an open meeting law complaint, we have no obligation, nor would it be appropriate to respond and to send the Division of Open Government a response that addresses some of these sort of ancillary issues that are not within their jurisdiction. So that's essentially what I've said here in this second paragraph on the third page. And then the last couple of paragraphs are the standard provisions that thank the complainant for bringing the matter to the attention of the commission, and then indicate that the complainant does have the authority to challenge the matter further if it so chooses. So that's the summary of this response, and again, I'll turn it back to you, Mr. Chairman. If you've got any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you. At this time, I don't have any questions. I want to open it to the commission, commissioners, if they have any questions on the proposed draft response.
Mr. Chairman?
Jack.
Through you. Adam, if you could help me, you'd indicated that we could have closed that meeting down and been legally within our rights to do that. Now, there would clearly, because of the noise and the confusion, we weren't sure whether it was a hearing.
Try and speak up.
I'm sorry. There wasn't a clarity with regard to the hearing was closed, that particular hearing, or the meeting, but in either case, I would fully accept that you have the freedom, the right of assembly, so there's no question about it. But if we believe that there's the potential for violence, we have the right, without question, to shut that meeting down. Would that be correct?
That is correct.
Okay. So when we received communications beforehand, where we had a chance to read that this assembly of people had essentially been urged by the board, according to the quote-unquote the Lorax, to come in and fight, and fight. And when all of a sudden the audience started becoming pretty boisterous, we should have shut it down at that point. And I believe that we had mentioned to the chairman that we probably should have shut it down earlier, and I think we as a board should go in that direction whenever there's a potential for something like that. So I would agree with these, but I just want to make sure we can shut it down if we believe that the audience is now. Now, if we shut the meeting down, we can convene it for maybe 15, 20 minutes, or is that it's got to shut down for the night.
So here are my thoughts in that regard, and you might imagine I'm at meetings like this 4 nights a week, and so I've seen all sorts of meetings, and all sorts of tempers flare, and arguments had, and voices raised, and so I appreciate that meetings can become uncomfortable at times, and there are circumstances where there is a concern for safety, or I referred at some point in this letter that I've drafted to, what I characterize as mayhem. I mean, I wasn't at the meeting, but I listened to the meeting on the audio tape, and it was difficult to even sort of follow along because there were so many different voices talking over one another, and some of those might have been commissioners, some of those were residents. I'm not pointing any fingers, but there was certainly mayhem at the meeting, and so it's always within the discretion of a chairperson of a public body to determine that, based upon the manner in which the meeting is proceeding, that there is a concern for the public safety or just an inability to maintain decorum, and therefore that the chairperson decides that meeting needs to be adjourned. Just because there are items on your agenda doesn't mean you need to get to those items. It doesn't work in reverse. You can't address items that aren't on the agenda. But if you've got a 10-item agenda and you get 3 items in and decide you're going to adjourn the meeting, that's perfectly fine. So the appropriate action here would have been, if you felt the meeting was getting unruly, or the chairperson did, the meeting could have been adjourned at that time, no further discussion, and had everybody gone home and vacated the room at the same time as the public did, and there had been no further reference or discussion of LSIC or its order of conditions extension, and no further discussion or negotiation of the regulations, that would have been perfectly fine. In terms of reconvening, you then have to reconvene at a future meeting that is in accordance with the open meeting law, which would mean at least 48 hours advance notice.
So there's no 15-minute calm down, quiet, it's shut down, or...
You can recess the meeting. The chairperson could say, this is getting out of hand, everybody needs to take a deep breath. I'm going to recess the meeting for 15 minutes, go outside, step outside, get a brush of fresh air, let's come back inside. If the chairperson's comfortable doing that, you can't adjourn the meeting, order individuals out, and then reconvene it without proper notice. 15 minutes later, 3 hours later, 24 hours later.
Okay.
Any other comments from the commission? Comments from the public? Sir, come down. Name and address again for folks at home.
Joel Swenson, 17 Ruth Street. I don't exactly know what my comment is, but I'm kind of formulating it as I go here, but I don't know when I'll have another opportunity to say it, so there could have been a better opportunity later. But, when that board reconvened, they didn't stick to pure agenda items. They actually added to the agenda item of heckling residents, making fun of residents, calling residents uneducated, and they should educate themselves. And when I actually stood up to ask that one question that I asked, I stayed at home that day for 4 hours preparing 3 pages worth of questions, because I'm not on the LSIC, I just live at Lake Shirley. And all these actions that this board's taking and LSIC's taking, by the way, I pay my dues, so yeah.
Please address your comments to the chair.
Yeah, that was to the chair. I'm looking around at everybody, actually. But I pay my dues to the LSIC. I'm not part of the LSIC. But I had the opportunity to ask a single question, and the best way to educate yourself is to actually ask questions of an authority. And I saw the chairman that day as an authority, and I saw this board as an authority, and I was asking a question that I thought was very well thought out, very well planned. I took a lot of personal time to figure out those questions, and I asked 1 out of 3 pages worth, and the response to that I got from the chairman was just purely ignoring me. And then when they re-adjourned after this, some people on this commission, I couldn't tell because it was audio, it wasn't video, but when he made fun of us for being uneducated, a lot of you guys guffawed, laughed, and agreed. And none of that was on the agenda, but that's just totally inappropriate. So I don't know how that falls under the open meeting law, but morally and ethically, the behavior of this board and the behavior of the chairman that's not even looking at me, and I'm addressing the chairman, it's just totally inappropriate.
Thank you. Any other public comment?
Attorney Robert Bowen. I live at 1686 Mass Ave, but I'm also representing the Lake Shirley Improvement Corporation. Sorry. A quiet attorney. Robert Bowen, 1686 Massachusetts Avenue, also an attorney representing the Lake Shirley Improvement Corporation. On behalf of its president, we take a little bit of offense to the description of the Lorax whipping people up to come to the meeting. We were invited to the meeting to discuss these issues before us. We're here tonight to discuss these issues before us. I'd like to keep the discussion to the issues before us and stop the name calling. Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional public comment? If we don't have any additional public comment, I will accept a motion to approve the draft response as presented.
So moved.
We have a motion and a second. A roll call vote. Richard Birch. Aye. Katie Childs.
Aye.
Bob Pease.
Aye.
Carl Luck.
Aye.
Ken Jones.
Aye.
Jack Rabbit.
Aye.
And I vote aye as well.
Thank you again, Mr. Chairman. I'll have to be quieter now. So you've got before you now the proposed response to the third open meeting law complaint received from Cindy Lee G. I'll read the substance of that complaint to you, or at least review it with you. Again, it pertains to the May 29, 2019 meeting of the commission. It again requests a public apology, speaks about the commission receiving training in the open meeting law, raises certain issues about discrimination toward women, speaks of the appointing authority considering these events in the context of the chair's removal, and also speaks of member Locke and concerns with his comments and behavior at prior meetings. And that's the substance of the relief sought. So in the proposed response that you have before you, again, other than a difference of names on the first page and the date on which the complaint was received, it is substantially the same. It recounts the same events. So the first page and a half to 2 pages, in fact, the first full 2 pages are identical to the previous response because the complaint is the same with respect to that meeting and the way in which it unfolded. On the third page, beginning again in the second paragraph, it speaks of the remaining or remainder of complaints that are part of the document, which are a bit different than Ms. Bellato's. So speaks of the chair's request that attendees of the meeting shut their phones off, speaks of the allegation of speaks of discrimination toward women, and states further again that the appointing authority should consider these events relative to removal of certain members. And again, much as I did previously, I'm not discounting any of these allegations, but I'm just simply not speaking to them because they're not allegations that fall within the context of the open meeting law. The commission's been made aware of them. Obviously, in approving my representation of the commission in responding to the open meeting law complaints, that's something that had to occur through the Board of Selectmen. So the Board of Selectmen is aware that these have been received. They're always aware when open meeting law complaints are received, and the Board of Selectmen is the appointing authority. So to the extent that Ms. Bellata or Ms. G are seeking to bring these issues forward to the town and make them known to the Selectmen, they've achieved that purpose because the Selectmen are now aware. But I'm not going to lend any credence to it in the context of an open meeting law complaint because it's simply not where it belongs. So I haven't done that in the letter. And then again, it concludes the same way as the last letter.
Okay. Thank you. With that, any comments on the response to Cindy Lee G? from the commission? Any additional public comment? I see none. I will take accept a motion to accept the draft response as presented.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Roll call vote. Richard Birch?
Aye.
Jack Rabbit?
Aye.
Ken Jones?
Aye.
Carl Luck?
Aye.
Bob Keys?
Aye.
Katie Giles?
Aye.
And I vote aye as well.
So I've got a third page.
Yes, so finally, Mr. Chairman, so this is a complaint received on the same day, June 27th as the last. Ashley Braun is the complainant, also speaks of the May 29, 2019 meeting. And so for purposes of the response, the first two pages are identical because they recount the same events from that meeting. The relief sought in Ms. Braun's complaint is, in terms of the way that it's phrased, nearly identical to what was sought by the previous complainants, or some of them, training session for the open meeting law, and a review of whether the current chair should remain in the position of chair, and also request a public apology. So on the last page, page 3 of the proposed response, I've addressed some of the substance of what is included in the description of the alleged violation by Ms. Braun, suggesting that she was ridiculed for an error that she made when she was speaking at that meeting after the public portion of the meeting had concluded, speaks about disappointing and unprofessional conduct of the chair, and things of that sort. So again, I feel like I'm repeating myself a bit, but those are not matters that fall within the context of the open meeting law. I appreciate the concerns, and they've been brought to the attention of the commission now and to the Board of Selectmen, and action can be taken or not as the commission and the selectmen see fit, but not something that falls within the scope of the open meeting law, and so I've not addressed it substantively in the letter. But again, I do refer to the remedial action with regard to the open meeting or closed meeting earlier on in the letter, and that's something that we'll be addressing on your agenda next.
Thank you. Any comments from the commission on the draft response to Ashley Braun's open meeting law complaint? I see none. Any comments from the public?
Ashley Braun, 607 Reservoir Road. So I'm pleased that you did receive my complaint and all got a copy of it and read it, and I'm happy to know that the selectmen read it. I would hope, to your previous comments, I think training for open meeting law would be appropriate, especially since in this meeting we were asked, the board was asking the town attorney for clarification on open meeting law. So I want to be able to work with you as a director for the LSIC. I expressed my disappointment in that open meeting law complaint. We all make mistakes. I made a mistake in that meeting, citing something that was not accurate. I did apologize in that meeting, and unfortunately was ridiculed for that afterwards. Or at least I felt as though I was ridiculed, and some of my neighbors confirmed that with me. I would hope going forward that you can educate yourselves formally in a formal setting to learn more about open meeting law. Because I know myself as a resident, I love this body of water, I love my neighbors, I want to have a safe environment for my family, and I want this relationship to work. That meeting was so utterly disappointing to me, because I've gone to many of your meetings, and I feel as though I always approach it with a very open mind, and I try to understand where you're coming from, and I thought that was very unfair and very disappointing. So I would just like you to take that to consideration, and I look forward to reading the attorney's response when I so receive it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Braun. Any additional public comment? There's no additional comment? No? Yes, ma'am. Name and address, please.
Chris Kalberg, 380 Sunset Lane. I just want to say that I'm really saddened to hear myself and my neighbors who are so concerned about this body of water being characterized as being threatening and potentially violent. That's not how I see myself. It's not how I view my neighbors. I was shocked that the police were called, and I think it would be the right thing for you to apologize to this group of people, because I'm sure there are a lot of us that are just shocked and offended to be characterized as, quote, an angry mob.
Thank you, ma'am. Is there any additional public comment?
Yes, I have spoken twice tonight.
Yeah.
I definitely have, yeah. You know, there were multiple newspaper articles that characterized that meeting, I thought unfairly. I would like to say that, you know, did the crowd get upset? Absolutely. You know, it's unfortunate. But a lot of the things that were all missing and what we were upset by was the behavior that actually started that. There was an extremely innocent question that was asked of a body, and there was a very purposeful action taken to not respond. And it wasn't even a silent action not to respond. There was an audible response when I asked, are you going to answer my question? And the answer was, no, I'm not. So we didn't come into that meeting with the purpose and intent of being an angry mob. I went in that meeting to get educated by you guys on what this issue is, and I still wanted an answer to my question. I didn't ask that with people prepared to start screaming. They started getting upset by the actions of the chairman, not because we all decided to act together as a mob. And that's what's being missed in all this, you know? The actions that were inappropriate were the actions of this committee as a whole and the chairman specifically. And I hope that's my opinion.
Sir,
thank you.
With
That's my
respect,
opinion.
you've kind of rehashed what you've said before. If you're not going to offer anything new, I thank you for your comment.
I would suggest to every citizen of Lunenburg and every citizen that's inside of this room tonight and listening to this audio that they do not support the chairman to be reappointed to the board when that opportunity arises. And any of the people on here that participated in laughing at me for being uneducated or Ms. Braun for being uneducated, that should also be weighed by the Board of Selectmen, because apparently we don't get to vote on this board. We have to rely on the Board of Selectmen to hear our voices when it comes to the reappointment of these people on this board. And there were some very inappropriate actions taken. Now, it might not have been in the context of open meeting law, as the attorney suggested. It was in the context of being a human being, a citizen, a neighbor, as a person, being arrogant to another person in a meeting. So I'm not saying that it was open meeting law violations. I'm saying it was just downright rude what the chairman did to me, what you guys did to Ashley, and all that should be taken into account when you guys get reappointed. You need to be held accountable. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Is there any additional public comment? Yes, sir.
I'd like to make a comment if I may.
Name and address, sir.
My name's John Tate. I live at 135 Flynn Road, and I've owned that property since 1981, so I think I have a little seniority on some of the folks in this audience.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Rabbit knows that well, don't you, Jack?
I do everything. It's good to see you.
I've served on several boards, one with this fella in the long distant past, and I in fact have been tied up with one board for many years with a a open meeting violation complaint. So I know where you're at here. I just want to remind everybody that the objective here is to maintain in good condition the town of Lunenburg's largest property. And to do that, this commission and the Lake Shirley Improvement Corp have got to learn to work together for the greater good of the greater number.
I couldn't agree more.
Enough said.
Thank you, John.
Any additional public comment? If there's no additional public comment, then I will accept a motion to accept the draft response prepared by Adam Costa to Ashley Braun.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and second. Roll call vote. Richard Birch.
Aye.
Katie Childs.
Aye.
Bob Pease.
Aye.
Carl Luck.
Aye.
Ken Jones.
Aye.
Jack Rabbit.
Aye.
I vote aye as well. All right. With that, let's move on to our next agenda item, which is further discussion of the LSIC's request for and action on an extended order of conditions, including discussion about a meeting between the chairman, LSIC president, and the respective attorneys, and potentially including a revote on the aforesaid extension.
Mr. Chairman? May I?
Yes, you may.
Thank you. So I just want to be clear with respect to this agenda item and the next, that these are the remedial action that I had referred to in the meeting law complaint responses. The first of these, the second one is simply your regulations, but the first of these, it was questionable whether the remedial action was even required, frankly. And I say that because, having reviewed the audio, there was not an extensive or prolonged continued discussion about LSIC or its request for an extended order of conditions, because there had been a vote. In fact, the vote occurred even before the real substance of the discussion and the back and forth with attendees occurred. And that was why it occurred, because the vote had occurred, and as I understood it from the recording, there was some dissatisfaction that that vote had occurred so quickly. So there's no obligation that you take another vote or that you discuss substantively, at least with respect to this agenda item. Much of what you had discussed previous to concluding the meeting, or at least ordering the meeting room empty. With that said, to the extent that you think it appropriate, Mr. Chairman, or the other commissioners wish to do so, you can certainly engage in a lengthier discussion. This was a request for an extension of an order of conditions, and so you had no obligation to conduct it like a public hearing. The DEP regulations don't require a public hearing for an extension, so it can be that simple. It can be the agenda item gets called, there's a motion, there's a second, and it's voted, and there's no opportunity for public comment and no real deliberation. That happens from time to time with extensions. I'm not saying it should have happened here. I'm not saying it should happen again tonight. I'm just simply saying that that in and of itself, in my opinion, was not a violation. But that's the purpose of this agenda item, is to give you the flexibility and the opportunity to further discuss that extension if you wish to do so. I know that there is a disagreement at the very heart of the issue here, which is the authority that the commission had in extending the order of conditions to extend it with certain additional conditions that are objected to by the LSIC or residents of the lake, some residents of the lake. I don't mean to paint with too broad of a brush. That's a disagreement that in fact has proceeded all the way to the courthouse. So I don't necessarily expect you to get into the details of that either, nor should you, quite frankly, if it's a subject of pending litigation. But certainly you can discuss generally the extension that was before you that night, and whether there are questions you wish to answer or deliberations you wish to have. That's fully within your discretion tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. With respect to this agenda item, I'd like to speak to it shortly and then open it up to the commission to see if they would like to engage in additional discussion and deliberation. Personally, I feel, based on the outcome, it makes sense to discuss the extension, and for the record, the extension of the order of conditions was until September 30th. Now, the Lake Shirley Improvement Corporation at the previous meeting, has requested that we extend the order of conditions from 2015 without any revisions until September 30th. At the 29th meeting, we added some revisions to that order, and that's what was approved to September 30th. My own opinion is at either order to the 30th of September doesn't change the activities that may be performed by the Lake Shirley Improvement Corporation, including weed treatment and algae treatment. So personally, in my view, it doesn't matter to me if we extend the previous order or keep the revised order, but I'd like the commission to weigh in if they see fit.
Mr. Chairman, through you.
Yes.
In our earlier deliberations, we had discussed the state of the lake, and we had also reviewed input from other outside sources. The reality is the DEP had put out a document a year earlier identifying the shortfalls that they had seen, including, the algae blooms, the turbidity, the concerns in oxygen. What we put in there was essentially we would like to see oxygen monitoring. In fact, especially during the winter, because once the ice hits, oxygen levels start going down. We don't know where we're starting from. We had actually, in fact, done this with other lakes, and we loaned the oxygen monitor out. All we were asking is that essentially this lake start meeting that requirement. Another piece of it was essentially we're looking at someone else to do some measurements. We've got a situation where we had observed previously that we couldn't validate data, but we allowed it to move ahead. In this particular case, we had the initial inputs we'd received saying, why don't we have somebody else do this look besides the people who are selling us the chemicals?
Jack, excuse me, are you referring to third-party testing?
Yes, excuse me.
The third-party evaluation. None of that evaluation will occur between now and September 30th.
Good point.
So I don't know that at this point that makes sense. I understand, but I'm just trying to look between now and September 30th.
Okay.
So would you be, I guess, would you be open to approving or reverting to the order from 2015 and extending that to the 30th?
Of September?
Yes.
As long as they comply with all the other requirements of the orders and terms and conditions. As long as you're doing that, I don't have a problem. If they're not, then I do have a problem with it. But as long as you're complying with all the terms and conditions that you've set forth, the oxygen doesn't bother me until the ice hits, and... So...
The LSIC has made their intent clear that between now and September 30th, they're going to file a new notice of intent, so a lot of these things will be rehashed then. So stuff that will be discussed in the pending notice of intent, let's leave those discussions for a future date.
Yeah.
And at this time, I just want to focus our discussion on the order of conditions extension to see if the commission wants to reconsider the extension with the revisions or the extension of the 2015 original order unrevised. Anyone else want to weigh in? Ken Jones?
I wasn't at the meeting that you guys took the vote on. If I had been, I think I would have voted in favor of it with the rest of the commission. I agree with you that I don't think there's anything that's going to change between now and September. So I think we should leave it as it is and let the vote stand that you guys took on that night.
I don't think, I categorically reject the assertion that's been made that because we passed this revised order of conditions, that Lake Shirley can't treat weeds this summer. I don't think there are any material differences between the present order of conditions and the original order of conditions that take effect prior to September 30th. I think most of the things that I think virtually all the things that have been objected to, take place after September 30th. having said that, if there is no difference between, the original order of conditions and the amended order of conditions, materially, then I don't see why we wouldn't go, to me, if there isn't any difference, why wouldn't we go back to the original one? It's like we've taken a public relations bath here, and I think unfairly. And so I don't know why we wouldn't go back to the original, be the bigger person and go back and pass the original order of conditions to September 30th, because they're going to have to file new orders of intent. They'll have their full ability to appeal to the DEP. So that's where I stand on this right now.
Thank you, Bob.
Mr. Chairman, can I respond?
Jack, then Carl.
Bob, the reason why I'm really interested in the oxygen monitoring is to establish a baseline, and such that we can continue to measure that through the year. And as soon as we get the baseline, we're much better off. And the other part of it was that I'm really interested in having another set of eyes on this, in terms of an independent set of eyes, not someone who's selling us the chemicals. And because I honestly had a chance to go out on the lake last weekend, and it was beautiful out there. It really was. The only thing that was missing was the plants and the weeds. And so, how does this work? And that's my interest in bringing in another party to doing a separate assessment.
As I recall the amended order of conditions, the third party wouldn't be called for until the 5th year. So that doesn't that does not happen before September 30th.
Okay.
And based on my knowledge of limnology, oxygen deprivation is not going to be a problem in the middle of the summer, unless unless the temperature goes way up. As the temperature goes up, the amount of oxygen that water can hold goes way down. And so, and there's nothing you can do about it. So to monitor it, I don't know why we'd monitor it if there's nothing you can do about it, because warm water does not hold oxygen. You can't make it hold oxygen.
Right. It's cold water that holds it better, but it would give us a baseline.
Carl?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman. I agree with the sentiments of yourself and Mr. Pease that there is very little substantive difference between the revised order of conditions and the old order of conditions, which makes you wonder why there's such a big outcry against the new order of conditions. The new order of conditions, I believe, we worked very hard on this, are better than the old order of conditions. And they're not just better for Conservation Commission, they're better for the LSIC. There are things in there that have been requested by the LSIC that we incorporated. Matter of fact, one of the few things that is different in this summer is the old order of conditions has different notification requirements that the LSIC requested we change, and we changed them. If we go back to the old order, they're going to go back to the more demanding notification requirements. As just one example of a very small thing that's changed. My other concern is that we keep talking about the new notice of intent, which we haven't seen yet.
It hasn't been filed yet.
Which hasn't been filed yet. This is going to be a very complex request and a very lengthy discussion over not only whatever is presented, which I don't know when we'll see it, but it's got to, I would say it's probably going to be a 3-month process by the time we see it. It gets advertised, we schedule a hearing, we start talking about the meat of it. We've been through this. It takes a very, very long time. My mind, it is...
Which is the reason we had proposed revisions in the first place.
Yeah, right. And the other reason we proposed them in the first place is because it clarifies it, and it really does help. It doesn't just make things better and try to get to the root cause of the problem here and not, try to solve the real problem, as the consultants say. But it also helps the LSIC and us better understand. There's a lot of places in the current order conditions that it's just not clear. It talks about a report, it doesn't say when it's due, it talks about monitoring things, it doesn't say what period you monitor. So it creates a lot of conflict because we have expectations, they're not met, but they're not written down. So it's understandable they're not met. We say.
So,
okay, so, but
to
my
focus-
concern about the.
On your first part, your first
right,
point, how does that affect what's going to happen between now and September 30th, Carl?
I'm going on a limb, but I think it's a very short limb, that we will not have a new order of conditions in place by the end of September. And that we will be looking at another extension. And I don't know when we'll get a acceptable order of conditions in place. And we may well be through the winter before that's the case. So we worked very hard on this. What do we want in place? Do we want the old one or do we want the better one? Very little difference between now and September, and if all the goals are met by September, then it can go either way. It doesn't much matter. It puts a little more burden on the association.
I understand your concerns, and I share many of those, but materially between now and September 30th, there's really not much difference between either version.
I believe there's not, but there are some sampling differences. There are some differences. People talk about algae, and I'm very concerned about algae as well, especially with these temperatures. There are clarifications of when algae testing is started in the new order of conditions, and that was part of the hole that we fell into, where in 2014 they closed the lake because algae monitoring was not taken quick enough. By the time the algae monitoring was taken, it was too late and they closed the lake. In the new order of conditions, it requires monitoring to be, algae counts, not all the time, algae counts to be taken when the clarity goes below 5 feet, which is a number recommended by the LSIC consultants. But it makes it very clear that below 5 feet, you need to take algae measurements. If that was in place in 2014, the lake would not have been closed. They would have known that the algae was coming, and they would have been able to treat in time before the state, before the limits exceeded the point that you could even treat. So there are things in this new order of conditions that are very important to protect the lake. And I just don't know why, after working so hard to get them in place, we would walk away from them. And we're going to be sitting here in September talking about extensions. I know we are. And what order of conditions are we going to talk about then? Are we going to have the same discussion in September about which order of conditions?
Extension. It's within our rights to deny an extension.
How would you feel about that? I'm not looking forward to denying an extension, and we wouldn't do it.
Well, because at this point, I don't want to, try and predict the future. I'd rather just see what we have in front of us.
Yes, and what we have in front of us, I think, was a good decision, a good order of conditions, and I see no reason to stand behind it because it's not burdensome for the next 3 months.
Understood. Katie, you want to weigh in?
Bob pretty much hit what I wanted to say on the head. Just to state my opinion, I would be in favor of using the order of conditions that we voted in on May 29th going forward.
Okay. Richard, do you want to say anything?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I guess I am not in favor of going back to the exact order of conditions prior to our revisions. I would rather see a dialogue that was started back in May as to what conditions they have issues with, rather than throwing out the entire document just in case we do need an extension moving forward. I would rather take the items that are in contention in the treatment section of it, or the treatment period between now and September, and either revert those individual sections or try to one verbiage that would be useful to both parties, rather than just eliminating all the work that we've done and going back to the original order of conditions that the entire commission thought was flawed. I mean, none of the votes that we took on this revised order of conditions or the revisements that we placed in the order of conditions had any dissension at all. These votes taken were 7-0 in favor of all of our changes. So I would, like I say, I would rather see us come up with a document between both parties if there are issues in the treatment period, and leave the document as was revised on April 17th in place.
Okay. Before we consider moving forward on any motions or anything like that, I'd like to open it up to public comment. If anyone from Lake Shirley wants to comment on the order of conditions.
Attorney Bowen again for the Lake Shirley Improvement Corporation. Just to answer one question that I heard from some members of the board, why would you revert to the old order of conditions for the limited period through September 30th? We're in litigation over a dispute about whether this commission had the authority to do that or not. We can put a hold on all of that and not have to litigate that issue if we simply revert to the old conditions. If there's no differences between now and September 30th, I don't know why you're forcing us into this litigation over that. We're doing the new notice of intent. We provided earlier a signed letter contract with the person who's doing that. We hope to have it in 2 weeks. We don't have a firm date yet, but it is in process. That's where we'll hammer out all of these details. That's where the negotiation will take place. It took 8 months to get us to this point. We don't understand the emergency. We're just looking for another couple of months to get us the new notice of intent and make this litigation go away. So that's what you gain. There is one difference, critical difference, that I'd like to highlight. One of the new requirements is a 14-day notice period before we can treat, to provide you with the treatment plan. Even if we did that tonight, which we're prepared to do, we've lost another 2 weeks. So there are material differences. We cannot operate under the new conditions, and we're just asking till September 30th. Thank you.
Mr. Chair? Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Carl.
I just lost my thought. I think that last comment is very consistent with what Mr. Bursch had said, that if there are specific issues that are going to create a problem in the next 2 months within the new order conditions, then I think that might be a good place to start this dialogue, because my understanding and feeling from the commission is that, pending any surprises, this is probably very close to the order conditions, the new order conditions that we would have against a new NOI. So it would be productive, I think, to start discussion on where the issues are now rather than wait later in the process, because we're going to have to work through it. So maybe the first place to work through it is the 14-day notice. I mean, I don't see any problem, with waiving that, or maybe waiving some other requirements if they're overburdensome, rather than throwing the document out.
Thanks, Carl.
Mr. Chairman, I think the last statement the attorney said is, he said we can't operate under this order of conditions, and I frankly don't understand that statement whatsoever, because we've sat here now for the last little bit talking about how there are really no material differences other than the 14 and 7-day and maybe some oxygen testing, the 14-day notice versus 7-day notice and maybe some oxygen testing. I don't see, where that statement is coming from. Thank you.
Thank you. Hold on.
If I could, yes, Mr. Chairman, I appreciate it. So I took your introductory remarks and your offer to fellow commissioners as maybe an opportunity to attempt to try and break the stalemate here between the commission and the residents or LSIC. And I think I'm following along with the comments from the commission. I obviously understand the matter well. I've been involved in the litigation, but I haven't been to all of your meetings, and I certainly wasn't involved in the process I've heard referred to as an 8-month process, plus or minus, where there was some discussion about the amended special conditions. I think for purposes of the dialogue, first and foremost, this amended series of special conditions needs to be viewed, at least for the purposes of our discussion tonight, through the lens of the short term. Because the concern that's been expressed by LSIC is we want to treat and we need to treat, they say, now. it's summertime and we can't do it or we won't do it under the amended order of conditions. And I don't want to debate whether they can't or won't. That's neither here nor there for purposes of what I'm about to say. But understanding the effort that went into this document, these amended special conditions, the amended special conditions are really only in effect, presuming there's no further extension, and maybe there would be such a request, until September 30th. So really, we're dealing with not even 3 months at this point. It's already, what, the 17th, 18th tonight? So we're dealing with another 70, 75 days before this is sort of a moot point, because they've either got to come forward with a notice of intent, at which point this discussion may be rehashed and probably will be, or they've got to come forward with an extension request. So I think in an effort to try and facilitate that discussion, I've heard something said that I can't follow along with, and Ms. Bellato just pulled me aside and she can't follow it either. And so if she can't follow it and I can't follow it, then maybe both of us are missing something. I've heard it said, and I heard it said in discussions I've had with you, Mr. Chairman, that there is no substantive difference between the old and the new special conditions as they are in effect this summer. No material substantive difference. We've heard the 14-day notice period referenced, but that's really the only substantive difference that I heard referenced in my conversations with you. But then I heard a couple of commissioners, or at least you, Mr. Luck, suggested maybe there were some additional requirements in the short term here with respect to algae or oxygen or whatnot. So I guess the real question in determining, because what I'd hate to see have happen is we talk through this for another 10 minutes or an hour tonight, and we're elevating, to go back to a comment I made earlier, form over substance here, where you're defending the new order of conditions or amended order on principle, they're refusing to comply with it on principle, but at the end of the day, the old one and the new one are identical for purposes of as it applies this summer. So if there are differences, maybe that's where to start the conversation. And if there's a conversation that can be had right here tonight with the LSIC president here about what those 1 or 2 or 3 or 0 differences are, and whether we can negotiate those even without negotiating away the whole special conditions, which become a moot point in 70 days anyway until they're either extended or you issue them as part of a new notice of intent. We're going to have the debate at some point in the future, because I suspect that if you issue a new notice of intent, it's probably going to include conditions like the ones you just spent 8 months working on. So we're going to have that negotiation and that dialogue, and hopefully that dialogue can start tonight, but hopefully it can finish tonight for purposes of discussing what's going to occur over the next 70 days. Because if it doesn't finish tonight and we have the discussion again in 2 weeks or 4 weeks, 70 days is going to become 50 days and 30 days, and the summer will be over. Thank you.
Thank you.
I would just like to support that, and I think maybe there are two ways we could approach it.
What's your suggestion?
Well, one is that we identify what we think, as I just did with the algae monitoring, where there's some critical things that do change during the summer that we should discuss how important we think they are, and algae monitoring is one of them. I think on the other side, we should open it up to the LSIC in terms of which items in the new order of conditions in the short term, and I'm happy to stick to the
just
short
between
term.
now and the 30th.
What items in the new order of conditions are creating such a burden that it makes it impossible for them to move forward and try to resolve those.
Are you prepared to speak to that, Joanna? Okay. Do we have copies of, Carl, do we have copies of the revised orders and the 2015 order?
I mean, I have one.
You want me to make multiple copies? I have a single.
Yeah, let's make multiple copies so the commission can have some, and LSIC and any of their other reps who like a copy can get those.
Mr. Chairman, through you, a question on that. Have we been...
Hold on.
Okay, come on.
We have an additional public comment. Come on up. Name and address.
Marilyn Jewell, 20 Sunset Lane. It would have been nice if along the way when the gentleman was working on the new order of conditions, that maybe talk to us, communicate, would have been nice. There's some verbiage in there that bothers me, and it's talking about drawdown, achieve. You can't say achieve, you have to say attempt to achieve.
So
we can't handle nature.
So I think like on drawdown and stuff like that, That's best saved for our next discussion later on when we talk about the new notice of intent, because the drawdown's going to happen after September 30th. I'm not saying you don't have a point. I think you do have a point, but I think...
there's some verbiage in there.
Right.
And I think maybe there's sort of like a give and take. We need to talk.
Sure.
We need to communicate, and we need to do what's best for the lake, but not... We're getting angry at each other, and this is not good because we can't work together if we're angry,
Agreed.
okay? So, I'm disappointed that we weren't ever talked to about it, and I just
Mr. Chairman?
think we would have been included.
Hold on. We have had so many discussions and we've had so many communications with the LSIC at multiple meetings. We have had a discussion. We've had dialogue after dialogue after dialogue. And it's not fair to say we haven't, because we have. Many times.
Mr. Chairman,
Hold on. Go ahead, Bob.
we sent them a draft in November that they commented on and sent us back. Okay?
We did.
We invited them to meetings, and they participated in the meetings where we discussed the revision of the order of conditions. In my knowledge, since I've been on this commission now for 3 years, in no other case have we ever discussed the order of conditions with the applicant. We just write the order of conditions, give it to the applicant, and that's the end of it. To me, we've already gone way beyond what we've done for any other applicant by reaching out to them, meeting with them at least 3 or 4 times at meetings where Joanna comes, okay? She sits, she talks, okay? And so for you to, for me to hear tonight that we did not dialogue and we did not reach out is just, it's not fair.
On the 29th of May, that's when we saw the final
Ms. Jewell,
draft.
please address your comments to the chair. Thank you.
On May 29th is when we saw the final paperwork. Prior to that, it was some red here, some red there, whatever. So
So for the record, the revised order was from April 17th, and we extended it on the 29th. But I will say, I agree with commissioners that the process was open and we solicited your participation. But I don't think I understand why the commissioners are upset. But for the purposes of tonight, I don't think it's productive to get upset. I think we focus on what's in front of us, not what's behind us.
And I apologize for getting upset, because really we should focus like on how we're going to do it better in the future, rather than what happened in the past. But to hear someone come up and say how it was done wrong in the past, but really we should focus now on how we're going to do it better tonight.
that's the remark I was making, that we need to work together and do a better job of it.
I agree.
Okay?
I agree. Thank you. So, can you give a copy of the 2017 order? And do we have the one from 2015 as well?
Mr. Chairman, so I've got copies of the 2015 special conditions and the 2019 special conditions, side by side. Do you want me to provide a copy to the...
Yes, please. Thank you. Yes, please. So for purposes tonight, as I'm looking at the differences between the 2019 and the 2015 order of conditions, one thing I'll point out is that Section 1 of the 2019 order of conditions deals with drawdown. We don't need to discuss about that, so we're just going to forgo all drawdown because that's past September 30th. Just one more thing, Joanna. And then our issues on annual reporting, none of that's going to occur between now and September 30th. So I think at this point, discussion on that should be left off the table, and we focus our efforts tonight on aquatic vegetation control and algae control.
Mr. Chairman, I just would like to know, we are continuing to, in terms of reporting, we'll be reporting as related to the 2015 document. And Matt, have we been receiving reports?
I'm sorry, can you speak up?
I'm sorry. I'm just, okay, if we're reverting to, we don't want to address that right tonight. And all I'm saying is, okay, with regard to the 2015 agreement, I'm asking Matt, are we in compliance with the agreement with regard to testing and reporting? Because I believe we did have requirements with regard to second disc being reported on a regular basis. That's
Yes, we
allowing us-
did, and I don't have any of that.
So we've not been receiving the reports.
No.
So, once again, we're not doing the measurements that had been agreed to
Well,
previously.
Jack.
I'm not trying to
Jack,
bill it.
hold on.
I'm just,
Joanna, hold on. Jack, with regard to the reporting, the reports aren't going to be due between now and September 30th. With the testing, we don't know what testing they have or have not done.
They are going to be required.
They are.
The algae readings, the safety disc
That's in
readings.
2020, Matt just said that in the...
no, that's the next one.
No, Matt just said in the meeting that no reports are due till 2020. Is that not correct?
So,
No, what I said was the new testing requirements that we were discussing, the expanded ones, minus the Ziki dish, weren't going to be due till 2020. Those are the ones I was referring to. The oxygen, the nitrate, the phosphate, the E. coli. That
No,
was the
I said
stuff.
algae, and you said that's all 2020. Because I'm not even acknowledging the E. coli or all that, because that's in the new one. That's not in our old one.
so we're going to get to the algae testing in the algae section, but can we agree that the annual reporting section is off the table for purposes of this discussion? Between now and September?
The problem I have with such a blanket statement, Mr. Chairman, is that we've put some of the requirements into the reporting. So if we just throw out the reporting section, some of the requirements are going to be gone. For instance, the measurements to be taken in periods, if they're not taken,
They can't be in the report.
they can't be available.
It won't be matter because after September
But if it's not
30th,
taken, we don't have the data.
that's true.
So we won't
There's
have
a whole
any,
season of data.
so we won't have any.
We don't know
readings.
what measurements they have or have not taken, but that's a fair
The
point.
past is fine. I'm concerned going forward. If we're
Okay.
not, if we're not taking the data now that we asked for going forward, we may miss an algae bloom because we're not taking the measurements. We're not doing the Secchi discs. And if you don't see the clarity slowly degrade, you can't get ahead of the algae.
Okay, well, has Mr. Patrick been doing his usual clarity measurements? You know, where he goes out in the boat, does the thing with the disc?
Of course he doesn't.
Okay, then, they've been done, I just don't have the data.
Because I'm
Right.
not following the order of conditions right now. What part doesn't anybody understand about that? Currently, right now, we do not have an order of conditions. We do not recognize the new one, and the old one expired on April 30th, I believe.
So you
Mr. Chairman, could we get
So,
back to
hold on
the-
one point. So, your clarity readings, we have weekly surveys required in the 2015 order of conditions as well as in the 2019 special conditions to the order of conditions. Have you been taking weekly algae readings? Okay. So,
Have we seen them?
We requested them, haven't we?
so if we come to an agreement tonight, are you going to be providing, you're going to provide the weekly surveys
I
you've
have
taken?
everything
Okay.
I need to comply with my 2015 order of conditions. I absolutely do.
Okay.
And I have a signed contract that I shared with the company that is working and should have the NOI by next week.
So the test I was talking about was the Ziki dish testing.
Yes, Richie is doing the
That's
safety just
what I
3
was
times a week.
The other stuff doesn't take effect until the same
Well, Mr.
time.
Luck feels that, I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, through you, I believe Mr. Luck feels that there's additional algae that's in this new report
Yep.
is what he's addressing.
Can I-
That you said was until 2020.
No, what I think he's saying is that Ziki dish testing.
Let Carl say it.
Can I say it?
Go ahead.
What can I say? What I was meant
ahead,
to say,
Carl.
maybe I didn't say it very well. What I meant to say was that the Secchi discs are basically the same. The sampling points have changed minor, but three data points is all we requested in the new one, and it's what it says in the old one. The point was, if only the new one is it defined that when the clarity drops below 5 feet, that algae counts will be taken, because that's a sign. When it's below 5 feet,
The algae may be coming. There's nothing in the old requirement that requires any algae test, no matter what happens to the psyche disc, and that's exactly what happened in 2014. There was no requirement, so no samples were taken. So if we don't have that piece of the new one, that same thing could happen again.
Would you agree to that? If clarity gets below 5 feet, you'll start taking, do algae count testing as described in the revised order? Yes. Okay.
So that part of the new requirement is not a problem.
How many samples, Brown? Isn't it 2?
Yeah.
Previously, we took 2, and it went to 5. We took 2 samples.
Yes, if I could, just to address Mr. Chairman through you.
Right. No, hold on.
We took 2 samples when algae went to 5.
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah. I live and breathe these things.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, just to clarify that point, the speaker is absolutely correct. For the last years, they've been taking, they've been taking 2 data points. For the last years, the old conditions have required 3. They have never taken the 3, and I wasn't going to get into that, but it's always required 3. They've taken 2.
That's what we've taken 2.
Yeah, but the requirement's always been 3, so that's not a new requirement at all. The only new requirement is actually pulling out of, actually, it's 3. The only new requirement is pulling out of the lake management plan the comment that when it goes below 5, algae counts will be taken, and putting that into the order of conditions. Because the lake management plan is not a controlling document the way we've been acting.
So one thing in the 2015 order that is a little ambiguous, item 2, if you look at the 2015, it says weekly surveys will be performed to gather water samples for each of the 3 basins for algae counts and a clarity check. So you haven't been doing algae counts every week since May, I'm assuming, correct?
Yeah, wait a minute, I'm sorry, I was looking at my map. Where are you?
So
You're on the
if you look,
2015.
2015 algae control number 2.
Hold on. Weekly surveys will be formed to gather water samples from each of 3 basins for algae counts and clarity check will be performed in multiple areas of differing depths of 3 basins. Just we do the 3 basins. Steve, how many algae do you do?
We do 3.
You do 3 water samples?
Correct.
And currently this year we've done 2 sets?
We're doing the second set this week.
We're doing the second set this week. We sent it to Alpha Labs and Dr. Kim Labs.
So, Mr. Chairman...
We are doing algae testing now.
If that's the case, then the new order of conditions is actually less...
That's kind of where I was going exactly,
The new order
Carl.
conditions only requires algae testing when it drops below 5 feet. If you're doing them now every week in 3 basins, that's very expensive and consuming, and we don't think you need that. We think only...
monthly, I'm sorry, we're doing monthly.
Okay, so...
But even then, you don't have to do it at all if the visibility is above 5 feet. You don't have to do it.
So, to your point, Carl, this requires weekly algae testing and clarity testing. You've been doing it monthly, so already this year, you're not in compliance with the 2015 order, which you say you want to comply with. But if we stayed with our revised condition in the 2019, you'd only be required to do weekly clarity testing in the 3 basins. And when clarity dropped below 5 feet, then that would trigger algae testing, which is much more expensive, which is the whole purpose we revised the condition, because in the 2015 order, it was a bit ambiguous, and we recognize that. And in my view, and I think some of the commissioners share this, the revised order is a little more clear and to your benefit. And this is something that will affect us between now and September 30th.
Right.
So, and just to be clear, if we went back to the old order of conditions, we would fully expect them to be met, and that they would have to now go to what it says, 3 clarity and 3 algae every week.
Agreed.
And I think that is a terrible waste of the people's money. But I think I think if we go into what's so offensive in the new one, it's a lot easier, because there's a lot of good stuff in the new one. if we just go black and white, new or old, and we go to old, it's going to be much more burdensome on the LSIC, and I'm afraid what we're going to have is we're going to start having enforcement orders because it's extremely difficult to truly comply with the old order conditions because of the way it's written.
So I don't disagree with that point. But to move the discussion along, again, we're trying to stay focused between now and September 30th. So let's back up a little bit. I think we agree that the drawdown's not a point of discussion. Let's step through aquatic vegetation control or chemical control from the 2015 order. I would very much like to see us just be able to amend or discuss what's in the 2019 order for aquatic vegetation that's material different than what we see in the 2015 order. So if we look at item 1, it appears to be identical to item 1 under chemical control. In 2015 is identical to item 1 under aquatic vegetation control in 2019. So we don't need to discuss that point. So item 2, our pre-treatment report. Items 2 and 3 for all kind of discuss the pre-treatment report. I think we should talk about this a little bit because I think this is going to come up later in our meeting because I know that the LSIC, their hope is to possibly treat next week. So the material differences between the reporting in the 2019 special conditions and the 2015 special conditions. I think the pre-treatment report from 2019 is clear in terms of what we're looking for. However, I guess at this time, because we're so close to treatment, I should ask Joanna, has the pre-treatment report been prepared and is it available?
I gave it to you.
Just received it.
So it's the one-page pre-treatment report with the areas. So a lot of the stuff in here.
Did I give, because I don't have it.
Yeah, you presented it to us earlier. Jack, you have a copy right here.
Yeah, we received it in the mail. I printed up a copy. Did you not receive it?
I haven't seen it.
Yeah, most people haven't seen it, and that's the problem. But I won't go there. I won't go there.
Do you have a copy? If not,
I received it, Jack. It's not that I was told.
Oh, I'm not suggesting anything on that side.
Thank you,
honestly.
because I just got it yesterday.
Yep, and I think
we just got
my copy's in my truck, actually. I may have to run out and grab it.
Big pile.
Do you have a meeting note you printed here, Matt?
I'm not hooked up to this printer here.
Okay.
Okay, here's Dominic's piece.
Mr. Chairman, I'm probably mistaken because I'm not a good scanner.
We
but
have it.
I think the only difference between the two orders of conditions is one sentence that was added to the new order conditions, which is the pre-treatment report will also include testing results from 2 major inlet sources for phosphate, nitrates, and E. coli. I think that's the only sentence that's been added. I think everything else is word for word.
You're correct.
And I thank you. Yeah. So that's the only difference. So we should talk about that.
There was no difference in period, Colin? Excuse me.
We're trying to have a dialogue, right?
So that requirement wasn't met in the report. I'm going to make copies of this for everyone. We need to their proposed treatment plan here. Yes, please.
Mr. Chairman, maybe what we're doing, just for the people here, and I'm really happy to see everybody here because this is what we need, is for people to hear what's really going on and what the requirements are. Because there's just too much high level, this is good, this is bad. The reason we added the testing for phosphates, nitrates, and was the result of the report that was a very expensive report that you paid for on the lake in terms of nutrients. And nutrients are the problem the lake has. Weeds are a result of the nutrients, but the real problem the lake has, and to clarify from Mr. Rabbit's discussion about the level 5, it's the nutrients that make this lake a level 5, the excessive nutrients. And those excessive nutrients are driving the growth of the weeds. And we need to get at them. And the report, the Ken Wagner WRC or whatever report, focused on that and said that we need to get to, and the nutrients primarily, 70-odd%, are coming into the lake from the Catacounamug and from Estabrook. They're not in the lake already, they're coming in. So when treating for the weeds just means that, geez, the nutrients are getting high again. So monitoring the nutrients at the inlets at the times of treatment, if you never have to treat, then great, there's no nutrient problem, you don't have to do that step. But if there's weeds are at the point where you need to treat, then it's a trigger to go look at the nutrient loading that's coming into the lake. And we have a lot of data, so we would know good measurements from bad measurements. So that's why that one sentence was put in there, is to get at the nutrients, which is the root cause. And they're not that expensive.
Mr. Chair, if I might just add to Mr. Luck's comment.
Go ahead, Rich.
Those requirements were in the 2015 order of conditions. All we did was move them from annual reporting to the pre-treatment survey because we weren't receiving them with the annual reporting. So it's not something that was not previously asked for in 2015 order of conditions. It was just simply moved from annual reporting to the aquatic treatment report.
Thank you for that clarification, Rick.
So technically, it's not a new condition, it's in the 2015.
For your information.
So, Mr. Chairman, I understand that we can't, that this requirement wasn't accepted and therefore it's not in the...
Right.
And that's okay, and I would hope this commission wouldn't hold up the retreatment because of this dispute, but I would hope that we could come up with a resolution where those measurements, because it's not critically tied to whether you treat or not, it's just a trigger of when you should go make a measurement. So whether the measurement's made before the treatment or before the submittal or after, I think doesn't make any difference. It's still the data we need.
Well,
so I guess we can plug that hole if the LSIC is willing to.
Right, and I think the LSIC, they may not want to agree to it now, but I think it's something you're certainly going to need to consider as the discussion moves forward when you submit your NOI.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
just so we don't keep
things that aren't changed, item 5 hasn't changed at all. So aside from that,
Mr. Chairman, if I could ask a clarification from Mr. Locke. You in the 2019, we requested 14 days, and you said that was the same in 2015? Or I thought it was 7.
No, there was no
time frame. And hence, that's why we won't go there.
That's why it was added, because last year, and these are all things that we're trying to learn as we go forward. Last year,
we saw at the night of our meeting.
LSIC came to the meeting with the request and had already advertised and had already planned to do the treatment the next day. And that was a little bit short, I think, and we thought that really wasn't fair, so we need to put some time limit on, how much time do we need to do a good evaluation and do our job? Maybe for this case, we clearly would be requested, I think, and probably go along with extending, with eliminating that.
And for purposes of this discussion, I believe Joanne's got Dominic Marangolo from Solitude on the line. Is that correct? Hi, Dominic. Can you hear us?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, great.
I can hear you now.
So before we get to talking about treatment for this year, let's try and get through some of the algae, the aquatic vegetation control section.
And Dominic's driving, so he
Yep.
doesn't have papers.
So the time requirement, as Carl said, we did put in because we didn't want to be blindsided with a report at the last minute and not have proper time to consider what's being presented. I think moving forward, LSIC should consider that we're going to want some time period. If you don't agree with the 14 days, I think you should consider, some period, maybe 7 days, or meet us somewhere in the middle there, because I know personally, I don't like to have reports sprung on me at the last minute without proper consideration.
Mr. Chairman, if I could add something to that. Last year, obviously, we saw the report just prior to the treatment. We did have a long discussion on that with regard to even the sampling and the way it was done, because we had, myself and a couple of members had gone out and done some sampling too earlier to gather our own data. Our data did not coincide, and Carl, if you could help me along with it, did not coincide at all with the data that was being presented, and then this was sprung on us. It put us in a real hard position, and later on, it turns out, well, I won't go there, I don't have the proof of that, but here we are. Once again, we had an agreement that it would try and get it to us as early as you possibly could before you started the treatment, because you can tell people, you're going to put signs up, people are going to make plans, theoretically, and for that matter, Dominic's business. Now, here we are, we're being asked tonight, theoretically, to allow treatment within 7 days. We can't even really meet in that particular time frame. We haven't posted it, we haven't spent any time looking at it, we haven't tried to even go out and do our own sampling to see if we can collaborate.
You weren't on Saturday?
Pardon?
You didn't go out Saturday?
We didn't go out to sample. We just went to look at a site because there were some erosion issues. So we didn't have that. We didn't do it. We weren't anticipating this because we thought we were going to get enough time to be able to go out and do it. It honestly put me in a real hard position, in that I had data that says, no, I shouldn't do it, but meantime, I appreciated the fact that the lake had to get treated according to what Dominic had. But I also left with the agreement that we would have enough time to be able to go through our own due diligence. So hence, I'm really kind of surprised that showed up today. And honestly, I have a real problem with not giving us more time to make this evaluation and being asked to make this decision tonight, because we won't meet again for another couple of weeks. So hence the 14 days it would be appropriate at this point in time, because honestly, I'm based on my experience, and I thought we had an agreement. Dominic, you can
hold on, Jack.
Okay.
So just in the aquatic vegetation control from 2019, the special conditions, substantially under chemical control, items 5, 6, and 7 are virtually identical to items 4, 5, and 6 in the 2015 order.
Mr. Chairman? No, there's a very significant difference in items 5.
Well, item 5 is, you're right.
It's very significant.
No chemical treatments within 100 feet of the town boundary in item 5 versus 1,300 feet in the 2015 order.
So if we went back to the 2015 order, you would not be able to treat within 1,500 feet of the Shirley line, which means the whole area down towards the railroad track.
That's not incorrect. We did it last year because Shirley had waived that. We came to you with the waiver from Shirley. We treated it last year. So.
But Mr. Chairman, we're given a choice here. Either go back to the old one, or we're willing to talk about and maybe modify the new one. If we go back to the old one, if we grant the request of going back to the old one, you can't pick and choose. It's got to be the whole old one, and the whole old one would not let them treat where I think they need to treat.
I don't disagree with you if we wanted to keep the 2015 intact. That's why we're trying to move forward with...
We already waived that with you for last year's treatment.
Right, but we don't waive it in perpetuity. We'd have to waive it every year. So we'd have to get a waiver from Shirley this year as well, I imagine.
I don't know what the process would be,
Or we'd at least need additional time to pull our file and evaluate that.
Mr. Chairman, I think we should stick with the new one and try to find out what is the problem, what are the problem items in the new one, and we'll fix those, if at all possible. Because if we go with the old one,
that's what we're trying to do. That's what we're trying to do, Carl.
Yeah, okay.
So which ones do you have a problem with in the new one? So we can get this over with.
No, you need to tell me because you all have a different view of what you want. You all just went around the table.
We don't. We have agreed, we voted and we've agreed on the new order of conditions. It's already been voted on. And if there's something that you guys don't agree with in there, tell us what it is so we can talk about it.
I agree with what Ken just said.
Because we're going in circles.
I have heard from Lake Shirley what it is that's in here that you object to that is so bad that you can't treat the summer. I have not heard that from you, Joanne. And I would love to hear from you. What is it that's in here that you find so bad that you can't treat?
And why haven't you heard from me, Bob?
Because you haven't given it to us.
Right, because as someone else said, and you said they were incorrect and got offended by that.
Folks, let's address that.
We were not
Thank you.
invited to meetings from December. We were invited to a workshop in December that Mr. Bursch provided a suggestion of edits for the order of conditions. Nobody was there but Mr. Pease, Mr. Luck, and Mr. Bursch. Mr. Pease had to leave, which caused us not to have a quorum, so we did a workshop, if you will. I took that item, that document from the workshop, and provided it to Dominic and Dr. Ken Wagner. Dr. Ken Wagner responded, Dominic responded, and I returned that to all of you. We talked about the oxygen level from what they wrote. We talked about, Dr. Wagner talked about the E. coli in his report because you were asking for phosphate and something else, I can't off the top of my head, and he said, well, if you're gonna ask for that, E. coli is more important to get to know than the other one, and then we weren't included in any conversation till April 7th, I came to you with what I learned from DEP, and then I came to you April 17th, and you voted on that new document.
Now, I don't know that you were formally invited, but I believe the discussion regarding the special order of conditions remained on almost every agenda we had between December and April. So
I would talk to Matt and ask-
agendas are public record, and
There was a line item.
there was an opportunity
blanket
for LSIC to attend each and every one of those meetings.
There was a
Chairman, if I could, Mr. Chairman, I would like to clarify. again
Carl, then Bob, then back to Joanna.
For the audience, that on the April 17th meeting, where we voted on this, where we had the final review on the order of conditions, Ms. Bellato was in the meeting, as well as two other members. At the beginning of our discussion, she was offered a copy of the document to go along with us and refused it, and then we proceeded.
Bob?
I apologize for getting us off track on a positive future approach. To me, we should focus on, what is it that LSIC objects to, and, and see if we can't, come to terms on that, and I apologize for getting us off track on a future-oriented approach.
Thanks, Bob. Sir, into the microphone, since we're on
You
TV.
probably don't have to allow me to comment, but, so I found it interesting something that Mr. Rabbit said, that you guys desire a 14-day period so that you can go out and do your own sampling. My money that I pay for dues pays for a professional aquatic management company to do sampling, and I'm a little surprised to hear that the Conservation Commission feels the need to go do their own sampling to confirm or deny what a professional company does. So I would like to suggest that if that's a requirement that you guys have, that perhaps we actually pull that out of all this and you guys take it upon yourselves to do your own sampling, seeing as though it's a requirement anyway. Because you want 14 days to do your own sampling, so why are we spending all the time doing the sampling?
Go ahead, Jack.
If I could respond to 2 points. First of all, we're essentially not doing a full survey. We're doing a sampling. The other part of it was the prior year, and Dominic, you can correct me if I'm wrong.
Provided us the reports of your sampling?
I don't think we need to.
Yeah.
I don't think you need to do the sampling, is my
Oh, that's your opinion.
Yeah,
Please address your comments to the chair.
If I could finish, please, Mr. Chairman. The other part of it was, and Dominic, you'll correct me if I'm wrong, you had a new crew of people doing the survey that year. And is that correct? It wasn't the normal people that were doing it? You had a new employee or some new employees out in that boat?
Typically, I had done the survey, but we had other biologists, experienced biologists that
Right.
did the surveys.
Who
And
had
this is
done that?
speaking about 2018.
2018.
Certainly qualified and experienced in doing those types of surveys.
Right.
So,
And we usually do 100 acres a year. That's ballpark.
Right.
And last year it was 40 acres.
Yeah, and we...
So we
Okay.
dramatically decreased. But again,
Yep.
what the body of water right now needs to be treated. I'm concerned because I think you said that there aren't any weeds in Lake Shirley.
No, I didn't. If I would compare healthy lakes with your lake, our lake, I apologize, I should never said that, our lake, was that there's a vast difference in terms of surface weeds.
So, hold on just a second. Ma'am, one?
All right.
You didn't give your name or address. I'm more than happy to let you make your comment. But Jack, if I may. Dominic, to Jack's point, can you address what is generally your rule of thumb that you use for a healthy percentage of weed cover throughout a lake, and what the percentage of weed cover in Lake Shirley is at this time, based on your survey?
well, we've established in the lake management plan at each point that if the density or biomass is a factor of 3 or 4 out of 1 out of 4, so 3 or 4 either density or biomass, at any particular point that would be a candidate for treatment.
And 4 indicates a very high density or concentration of weeds, correct?
Basically, it's the scale of 1 to 4, it's roughly 25% increment, so 3 or 4 would be greater than 50% cover of the bottom and or greater than 50% height of the plants in the water column.
Yep, and this methodology has been used since 2015 and didn't change with any revisions to the special conditions, correct?
That's correct. That was established in the most recent lake management plan. That's this.
All right. Mr. Chairman?
Also, the presence of any non-native species trumps the 3 and 4 factor biomass or density. If there's a presence of a non-native species that we're managing, like milkfoil, like curlew pond, that area would be potential for treatment as well.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, point of order. What are we discussing right now? I'm confused.
Right.
Are we discussing number 2, or are we discussing the treatment of Lake Shirley?
I'm on number 6, aquatic vegetation control.
Okay.
The last sentence I have, the notice will contain, Dominic, are you with me? Number 6, you send me orange flyers every year that I go and I put on all the telephone poles around Lake Shirley. Correct?
Yes, we do.
It's a standard format from the DEP, correct?
Correct.
And on the new number 6, they want you to change that. So can you call DEP and see if they'll change the Massachusetts Wetland Protect Universal Chemical Treatment poster so I can put the right one on our telephone pole by next Thursday? Do you think they could get that done?
What the changes, the treatment maps that the treatment posters that we've been sending you have been the same for...
Yeah, they don't like them anymore.
I mean, it's a standard format that was provided to us by DEP.
Yes, I know.
I've never asked them to change the format.
Yeah, and number 6 says, the notice will contain a listing of all products being applied, all precautions to people in the treatment area, and re-entry information. LSIC will also have available on their website. Yeah, that's fine. But you'll have to give me those labels and I can put them on.
Mr. Chairman?
Hold on.
I think in the past we provided you with a legal or treatment notice as well. That was, I believe, put in the newspapers and put on the website, which is separate from the posters that you hang up around the shoreline.
Thank you.
Carl?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I would just like to point out that the words that were just read by Ms. Bellata were exactly the same words from 2015. That hasn't changed. The only thing that changed in that paragraph was it was a request by the LSIC to change the notification to the town manager. And we agreed with that and we put it in. So I'm not sure what the label thing is about. We didn't change anything to do with the label or the notification.
So I think your confusion, Joanna, may have been item 7 under aquatic vegetation control mirrors item 6 in chemicals control from 2015. They're identical. So what you just indicated, they're identical.
Wait, I can go back now. It's not.
Yeah, so if you look at...
It's Dominic and I went through it already.
So item 6, post-treatment report from 2015 is the same as item 7 from the 2019 special conditions.
I'm on 6.
Right, so item 6
On 19.
is virtually identical with, I think, one minor change, Carl?
Yeah, well, we
to
were
item
asked to change the
5
notification.
under chemical control. The difference being, as Carl pointed out, that instead of verbal notice at a Board of Selectmen's meeting, you'll provide written notice of the town manager.
That was at your request, so you didn't have to, now you don't have to go to the selectmen meeting, you can just send them written.
Did I argue?
No, I'm just saying, that was a...
That was my...
Okay.
Yes,
Yeah,
and we
okay, good.
incorporated it, so that's in the new one. If we go back to the old one, we lose that.
So
You have to go to the selectmen meeting.
everybody, take a breath. This is arduous process going through these and seeing the difference, but really, the big difference I see in the aquatic vegetation control section is that 14-day waiting period
I haven't been on algae yet.
for added pre-treatment report. And, moving forward, if this was gonna
God bless
move,
you.
I think we need some advance notice. I'd be open to 7 days, but...
God bless you.
Go-
Mr. Chair, we
go
don't have
ahead,
time.
Jack.
I mean, we have
Well,
to
this
even
year-
post a meeting. Even to post a meeting,
Right.
we have to put it out a week, and then we have to come to an agreement, and we're in a regular cycle. So to walk in the night before and say, here you go, that doesn't work. We need about 2 weeks. That's how we came to the 2 weeks.
Mr. Chairman, I
Go
think,
ahead, Carl.
I agree with that going forward for now, and I know we're not at the treatment. I think that is one of the things that we can waive or deal with so that they can treat when they want to next week. As long as the advertisings and all the other things are in place, then I don't see a problem with it. And I would like to clarify, maybe we used the wrong word about, survey, that we do a survey. We don't do a survey. We do just what we do with every other applicant notice that comes in. We have a site visit, and this site happens to be Lake Shirley. It's normal for us to go take a look at the site and see if we have all the information, if it's correct, if we agree. And that's what we did, and I would fully hope we continue to do, just like we do with any other applicant.
We took measurements.
So do you do samplings like you said? You said we do samplings.
We take measurements, yes, we do.
We can take a secchi disc.
We're validating
Okay.
the data.
Does everybody have Dominic's proposal?
Mr. Chairman, just a clarification from...
Hold on.
Can you get a copy?
We do, but we're not talking about that right now.
So, let's go through algae control.
Can you get a copy?
Let's go through algae control, then we're going to come back to, once we can wrap this up, then we can come back to proposed treatment for next week. So let's go through algae control here. So you haven't proposed any changes to the revised special conditions from 2019, Joanna? And you haven't provided any objections in aquatic vegetation control, other than the 14-day period, which we said we could talk about. But at this point this year, won't make a difference between now and September 30th. So for the section in the 2019 special conditions under aquatic vegetation control, other than the 14-day period, there...
No, that was my only concern in that one, was the 14-day period.
Okay, so let's put that section to bed. Let's tackle the algae control section, and then we'll come back to, and then we're going to discuss.
Yes, I've always said the
treatment for
14
next week.
days is
Okay.
my only issue in the aquatic control.
Okay. So the algae control section, as we discussed earlier, so algae control in the 2015 special conditions and the 2019 special conditions, item 1, I'm not seeing, this is when I wish I had my red line copy, but I'm not seeing any differences in item 1.
No, I'm good.
Okay. Item 2, this is the weekly surveys. We talked about this earlier. 2015 required algae counts and clarity checks weekly. 2019 requires clarity checks weekly, and then if your clarity drops below 5 feet, that will trigger algae count testing. That's a less stringent requirement. I mean, we can go back to the other if you wish. And if voted on tonight for an extension, that would mean we would expect results of your weekly testing for clarity, and if triggered, algae counts be reported to the commission.
And if not?
I don't know why John looking at it. All right, go ahead.
All right, so if you want to come back to item 2, we can. So item 3 from each special condition is, in my quick reading here, it appears identical.
Identical, yes.
3 is identical.
Okay. So item 4, application of products commence when the cell counts or biomass are deemed above a level where immediate treatment is required. Item 4 is identical. In each one. Item 5, this is the same difference that we saw, the 1,300 feet versus 100 feet. The updated condition is 100 feet, which is what we want.
Well, yeah, that's what surely.
Right. So prior to any application in item 6, the Conservation Commission will be notified and report showing levels exceeding the approved threshold would be submitted. Due to the time-sensitive nature of algae treatment, the LCC agent is empowered to grant permission for algae control treatment. The applicator's name, copy of their pesticide license, certificate of insurance, and listing of products shall be furnished to the LCC prior to treatment. This is identical to item 6 from the 2015 condition. Item 7, if you read through that,
it's identical.
The difference in item 7 is, again, instead of verbal notice to the Board of Selectmen, we're request written notice to the town manager.
Correct.
And then the post-treatment report will contain time of application again. These are identical from each order. So the only difference is, do you want to do more algae count testing or less algae count testing in item 2? If you want to do more, we can incorporate the language, but I recommend, and I think most commissioners recommend, we stick with a revised, clarified language regarding clarity and algae testing, algae count testing.
On the map that was provided, there's 3 diamonds.
The map provided from
from...
within Solitude's,
Solitude.
yeah.
Yeah, if I could address that.
No, that was the
Mr.
map, I think we,
Yeah,
You
no,
created this, oh,
Yeah.
yes, thank you.
Which, we took,
we just moved the points.
no, that's Solitude's.
Right, but you added.
Ours is handwritten because I didn't have the tools. That's what's in your lake management plan. And it has
I know.
the same 3 Secchi disc regions, 1 each basin. Ours actually requires less testing if there's an algae issue. Your lake management plan and proposal was 8 locations total, and ours is 6.
On this plan, I want you to clarify for me all of these points. Because you have the diamonds, 1, 2, 3, right, which is the,
You're looking at your own document. That's your document.
no, okay.
Our document, I can show you, is right here. It's not as professional looking as that. That's our document.
Can you make a copy of that, Carl, and pass it around so we can, I think it's valuable for point of discussion.
In the prior meeting, it never came up. I've got quite a few copies, actually. How many do you need?
I think we got enough out of it.
I think we got enough.
Yeah, we're good.
Yeah, we got it.
Save the paper.
Probably 15, that's not one for everybody. You can see it on the website. You see the great similarity. So, your document, which is the one you're holding up, which is this one, which has the nice little legends, has 3 clarity locations, 1 in each basin, that are to be taken every week. And it's the same as ours. We have 3 clarity locations. We have slightly moved the one in the second, one from the 3rd basin to the 2nd basin, because there were none in the 2nd basin. And that's always been a requirement to monitor each basin, not just the 1st and the 3rd. Particularly important for algae, because algae starts in the 1st, which is where all the phosphates come in, progresses through the 2nd, and hardly ever reaches the 3rd. So taking 2 clarity measurements in the 3rd basin seems like a waste. We really need one in the 2nd. So that's the only change we made to your document. We reduced the number of, it says additional clarity stations and algae collection stations. There were 7 of those in your document. We have 4.
Right, I see the numbers.
You know.
Yeah, I can see them right there. I can.
Yeah,
But for everybody else that can't see
I'd like to know
them,
what's going on.
Are you okay?
no, I'm frustrated
I
with this
understand that it's
process.
not my fault.
No?
It's not
So-
my fault you're frustrated. Because I'm as frustrated as you.
Okay.
I am very frustrated.
Let's direct everybody's anger towards the
So,
chair, because
how
I'm
many-
keeping everybody here right
You
now.
just said, it. I've done 2 algae, right? I've always done and reported the 2 algae.
The
The water samples, we always did the 2 water samples, which you
It's-
said I'm wrong.
It's what you've been
Because
doing, it's not what the
correct.
requirement was.
Correct. That's what I said, I've always
Right.
done the 2.
Yeah, just-
Okay.
Because we added 3, and
So-
I never agreed to the 3.
So moving
But I
forward,
signed- There's 4.
there's 4 proposed algae. However, our testing requirement is much less because it's only triggered based on the clarity.
But this is where we mince words as a group, because I keep saying 2 and 4. I see 2 is what I did, there's 4 here. And then everybody else says, no, there's no change there. But
Okay,
there's 2 additional, which we do 4, and it's $800. We're doing 4 for
Right.
Dr. Ken Wagner, because he wants to keep, so we're trying to see if we can figure out historically, over summers, why algae's breaking out, and if there's things we can do beforehand. So we bought equipment, we have a team that goes out, and they're sending the water samples to Dr. Wagner to try to figure out that dilemma.
okay. So which algae points? Because I think the 2 points in the North Basin at the Catacootamug and the Estabrook, in the vicinity of those, are quite valuable. And then which points do you object to?
It's steep.
Oh, and, you know, Dominic, maybe you can, are you still on the line?
Yeah, I'm still here. Unfortunately, I don't have access to the maps and stuff that you guys are looking at. It's a little difficult, but...
Understood. So if I can describe it in the maps, so in the North Basin, there's 2 proposed algae testing points, which would only be triggered if the clarity drops, as we've stated. One is by the inflow of Estabrook, and one's by the inflow of the Catacutama. And then there's, hold on, Joanne. Then there's an additional point, one in the vicinity of the dam near, on the eastern basin, near the east side of the south basin near the dam. And then the commission also requested one on the, the south side of the middle basin. So towards the southernmost point on the western side of the lake. So
Then we did a shallow one. Remember
I do recall that
and we did
had an increased number of clarity testing stations when the clarity dropped, but I honestly don't remember that we added algae sampling stations.
Yeah, and we did one did one, Dominic, in a shallow area.
That's the south one.
Is in the shallow basin?
Yes.
It's in a shallow?
Yes.
Because I know that was the new one we added.
Right, and in
Was in a
fact,
shallow
the area
area.
where that is proposed is actually proposed for weed treatment this year, because it's shallow and it gets weed filled. So that's the vicinity of where that sampling point was. So I guess my question to you, Dominic, is what would your recommendation as a expert be for algae testing, and why would you eliminate points or key points where you test within the lake?
Well, I think generally we like to try to take the representative sample. So if you take a sample closer to shore, you may tend to get higher levels than what you have in the basin in general. So I know that typically we had taken samples from like the center of the North Basin and in the vicinity of the deep hole in the South Basin.
Would there be any danger if you're taking samples from the center of the basin? I know you said it's representative. Would there be any danger that you could miss you wouldn't be sampling a potential, increase in cells soon enough because you're not picking them up where they're reproducing in some of these shallower areas, or?
Well, it's a bit of a conundrum because I know that the state does usually samples on shoreline areas. Like if there's a beach or something on a lake, they kind of want to get the potentially highest areas in terms of swimming safety and whatnot. But in terms of triggering a treatment, I think sometimes the shallow water samples can overestimate how much of a problem there is in the lake, and sometimes it can vary depending on wind direction and stuff like that. So it's kind of difficult, and obviously, as Joanna said, every sample that's taken, it costs the LSIC money. So
right,
I can understand trying to limit the number of samples taken as well.
Mr. Chairman? So, hold on one second, Carl. So, any testing outside of our requirement they do is completely at their discretion. They can test as much or as little as many points or as few points as they want. I think what Dominic said kind of leads me to believe that it may be useful in at least the North Basin and the South Basin to have a shallow sample and a deeper sample to try and look at that balance between the shallow and the overall count. I don't know what your thought is on that, or if maybe it only makes sense in where we're getting more inflows in the North Basin. Dominic, your thoughts?
Yeah, unfortunately, obviously, it also depends on the wind direction. If you say it had a northwesterly wind for 2 days, you're going to have a collection and potentially have a higher count at the windward side of the lake. So having kind of a set shallow water sampling station is not necessarily ideal. You probably would want to vary that depending on where you visually see some buildup of algae, if that's the case. And if you don't necessarily see any areas that are different or have different clarity readings, then it may not be necessary to take a different sample. I think some of that has to be based on some visual observations from day to day. In terms of, I don't think you necessarily see a buildup of algae necessarily in inlet areas. Usually it's more governed by kind of water currents and wind currents rather than inflowing water necessarily.
So on a lake of this size, would you think it makes sense to have at least two points designated for sampling, or at least 2 sampling locations and additional sampling locations added at the discretion of the aquatic expert?
I would say we should definitely do the two sample stations out in the middle of each basin, and then I think that if we start to see some shoreline build up, just in terms of swimmer safety, that at the discretion we could potentially collect samples in the shallower water area if there's some buildup observed.
Thoughts on that, commissioners?
Yeah, I spent during the algae.
Hold on, Rich. Can't quite hear you.
Now, if I might, one of the things that set us up with the map and the testing spots was more an issue of the algae bloom and the speed at which it can come on. I do understand the costs, I do understand the labor involved, but this is one of those issues on the lake that if I were living on the lake, I would like to see a reasonable amount of testing to ensure that a bloom does not take place. So we set out some standards for minimal testing, and I think that's great that Joanna and the LSIC are doing above that for trying to get some algae monitoring going on, to get some models in place for why we're having all of the algae blooms we're having over the recent years. But to follow through with the way we've set up additional testing as the threats of an algae bloom increases. So as somebody that lives on the lake, it's certainly at their discretion, but myself to spend $400 or $800 to ensure that we don't have an algae bloom, or we don't have a dangerous level of the blue-green algae, which is the algae we're ultimately concerned with, that we should not necessarily just argue about a few dollars and a few testing spots. We really should make sure that it's in place and structured to prevent the bloom that could occur, because it comes on quickly and then the lake is closed for an extended period of time.
So, moving.
I will say that
Go ahead, Dominic.
You're gonna have a major bloom. You're gonna see the counts go up in the middle sampling stations out in the middle of the basin. When you have a kind of a mild bloom, that's when you could potentially have, with the wind, you could have certain areas of the shoreline that may have a buildup of algae. And to me, I mean, I know a lot of towns, a lot of cities that I work with, I think the health departments help out with some of that sampling too, in terms of either sampling or helping to pay for that, because it is more of a health safety, health risk type of a thing. So, but in terms of managing algae blooms, I would say that the bloom needs to be potentially treated, that it would, that'd be indicated by the samples taken out in the main basin. If you're likely to have a high count in the shallow area, if there's without having a high count in the middle, if there is a lake-wide bloom going on.
So my feeling based on this discussion is right now, this is something that we're going to need to talk about more in the next notice of intent, because I don't think we're agreed upon here I guess my question to LSIC at this point is, can we accept this item between now and September 30th?
Save a pile of money, too.
That's fine. I just need to finish this.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, Mayor, speaker, just thinking, I'd just like to remind us all here that this document came to us as
This document, please clarify
This
which.
document is the document that the LSIC submitted to us as the proposed sampling plan. This is the document right here. Draft LSIC order conditions. And this was given to us and prepared by Solitude. And it has four...
When did they submit that, Carl? For
as of 4/17/19. I don't know when they submitted to us. Oh, it's in the lake management plan. When did you submit the lake management plan? That was in, I don't know. When that was.
April.
April?
April.
Okay. So this
April of
document,
19.
If you, yeah, 19.
Because Matt asked Dominic to update the map for you.
But this is what was submitted. This is what was submitted. It has 4 algae sampling points.
Yes,
We also
was instructed.
We also
Yes,
have.
you were instructed to ask Dominic to take the map out of the lake management plan and update it.
But that's what I'm saying. It comes from your lake management plan. This is what was proposed.
Carl, I think we're talking past each other here a little bit. They updated it at our request, but they're saying they never accepted it formally. Joanna just said she'd accept these points
let's move on.
between now and September 30th, and let's move on. That gets us through the annual reporting. All of our annual reports are due after September 30th, so I understand we want to keep some of those requirements within the testing requirements within the future notice of intent, but at this time, between now and September 30th, the next 75 or so days, it doesn't matter.
But let's clarify expectations again so we don't get in trouble. Are we expecting an annual report for this period?
For the data they collect, I would think, but that's something we need to talk about once they file another notice of intent.
Well, no, the period we're talking, so we've got an annual report.
So, hold on, let me propose a scenario. So, say we go to September 30th, and there's no notice of intent, they wouldn't have any expectation of collecting any data when they don't have an existing order. But for the period where they're in their order and they're obligated to collect the data, whatever that data requirement is, yes, we expect them to fulfill it.
So again, just so everybody understands the expectation, because the annual report we got for last year was through, what, October? What was the period of the report from last year? Do you know when that was, Joanne?
No, I think it goes from,
I think it was through the end of October, so I think it was due.
Yeah, okay.
right, it goes from spring to October.
Right, okay.
And Rich wants it to go from October to October.
In the new condition,
one.
yeah.
Right.
But my point is, so we have a report in place that covers all the activity, all the data, all the work that was done, whatever, through October of 18. I would think we're going to expect a report through September of this year.
Yeah.
Even, and the new NOI is a new NOI, it's new business. But October through September of this year needs to be documented, I believe.
That would, if I'm looking at this, that would be, the annual report will include data from October 15th to October 14th. The report and then when it would be in, I think, later in this, it's due in December, I believe. But again, Carl, I think, I understand where you're going with this.
Well, I just want to clarify, are we expecting a report for the period from October 18 through the end of September of 19? Are we going to expect a report for that period?
I would hope so.
Yeah, I would hope so as well.
Okay, so
I would expect so if they want to get future permission to do anything on that.
Okay. So then we should just be careful, and I'll look through here quickly.
Right. Now, one thing I will say, this has been kind of a curious year with you know, different orders and people recognizing orders and not recognizing orders. So if there's deficiencies in data collection or something due to the contention that happened this year, I think not only should they, be understandable, that they should be expected. And we shouldn't freak out if, hey, we didn't collect data in April because we were fighting amongst us, but between the LCC and the LSIC. And I think that's to try and say, if we start this whole process, get a new NOI in place, and then say, well, your report last year sucks, and you didn't do this, this, and this, that won't be productive either in moving the relationship forward.
So because they didn't agree with what we said, they're not responsible for reporting?
No, I'm saying they report what they've collected.
Which isn't what we asked for.
That's not the agreement we made, Todd. The agreement was that essentially we would get weekly reports, right? Joanna points out they only do 2 surveys. We asked for 3 in the 3 different basins. They decided they don't do, and we don't have the reports. And I don't know which, okay, if you're saying it's stopped and we're not going to comply with 2015, but I don't want to comply with 2019, I guess, I don't understand why we're not seeing the reports and what they're saying, Joanna.
Because what I said, and I'll say it clearly.
Okay, please, thank you.
You're welcome. The order of conditions for 2015 expired
That's correct.
April 30th. You voted this new order in on April 19th of 2019.
Right.
And Mr. Lucky is correct. He did ask me after you voted it if I wanted a copy, and I said no, because I stood up and said I rescind the request to extend the order of conditions because we do not agree with the April 19th meeting.
Right.
And hear me, because I think there's confusion. What I don't agree with is, first and foremost, in September we asked to extend our order of conditions. Authority-wise, you could say yes or no. 8 months later, April 7th, April 17th, I got this document, which I was not a participant from December to. I came to meetings, I came to 2 March meetings. I sat there till 11:15 at night. I sat here, had conversation, never saw orders of conditions. But I was here every month. I called Matt, said text, email, do I need to come? No, not tonight, yep, tonight. So Matt and I were in contact for every one of your meetings, and if I should come or not come. So you gave me this new order. I stood up and said, I'm not going to accept that.
I think you got up and walked out.
I did. I said, I'm not going to accept that. I'm sorry we have to go this avenue. And I walked out. So for me, I didn't have anything to do. I was hoping that we would be able to work this out collaboratively. Mr. Luck sent an email to come. The door's still open. We came to the May 29th meeting that did not go well. And here we are today. We never wanted to go to court. I want to put the money in the body of water. We all collectively, looking around, have lost the concept of the purpose. We're all here is for a body of water. And we're fighting over who has more power or who's going to do what, and not the body of water. And as Dr. Ken Wagner says, who approved the GEIR that we all live by, if anything in this document is not going to help the weeds in your lake, it doesn't need to be there. If you want to put it in there, so be it. But every item you should be putting in here is somehow going to help the weed, lake management, water quality of the body of water.
And that's where we disagree.
Yeah.
I understand that.
So-
But go ahead.
So, to get to the point of annual reporting right now, the annual report, as stated in item 2 of annual reporting in the 2019 order of conditions, we clarified this. It includes data from October 15th to October 14th of the following year. And it will be submitted to the commission by December 15th, the next business day. We've been fighting about this for 20 minutes, but really, it's not going to come to fruition until December 15th. So I'd like to, for purposes of tonight, I'd like to at least table that. Bob?
Do I understand it then that it's LSIC's position that they don't owe us any data from April 15th on until, we issue some order of conditions that they accept? Is that their position?
Joanne, is that your position? So all data that you have collected this year, whether it's cell counts, whether it's collected, you'll report even within the period where we were in limbo.
I believe I have to give them to Matt weekly, right? Isn't that what it said? So I have to give those to Matt. If we walk out of here tonight with an order of conditions and a treatment, I'm gonna go home, I'm gonna send him the clarity levels I have to date. And going forward, I'm gonna send him what I have. But
Exactly.
exactly, I'm
Okay,
not fighting,
good.
but October 15th, if, I'm not gonna, December 15th, I'm not giving you a report, because we're working on an NOI.
So where we are right now, based on this,
Till
is
September 30th, I'll give you everything I'm supposed to give you. Absolutely.
to September 30th right now, this, essentially, you've given us 0 revisions that I can see.
Well, the 14
The
days.
one we're gonna waive is the 14 days for this.
I haven't agreed on that.
We're
gonna talk.
You haven't
Jack's
agreed,
not gonna
but
waive that.
he's,
Right, I just did everything you
that's your
asked, but
opinion,
Jack's not
you're
gonna
one
waive
member.
that.
You're one member, every
That's
commissioner has their own opinion on that. So with that change,
Right, I know it's funny.
with that change. It's funny. That's the only change, is we can accept the 2019 revised special conditions.
Just a clarification, what we've been talking about is not to change it, but when we get to the treatment request, we're going to waive it.
Correct.
It's going to stand in the
For
document.
2019,
For this year, we're going to waive it.
Yes. That's the only time it's applicable right now, is in 2019.
Well, till September 30th, this is only
Correct,
good till
correct,
September
Joanne,
30th.
correct.
So meet your needs.
Okay, so
I'm okay with waivering it.
at this
I just
point,
don't want to lose it.
is there any additional public comment?
Don't worry.
Then I,
What about staff management, 45 there are also some additional oxygen reporting.
Not from now till September 30th.
I thought there were.
No.
No, it doesn't kick in.
No other testing is.
Not till September.
It would be nice if they did, because then we can get a baseline. I know Bob and I.
Before that was part of it.
Yeah, no.
Worried about
That
We're
was
not.
later.
yep.
No. we're
All
not.
right, so, sir, come on back up.
135 Flynn Road.
Come talking to the microphone, please.
Move the question.
Thank you. I will accept a motion with,
Mr. Chairman, why do we need to take another vote? It's already voted on.
Yeah.
We don't need another
because
vote.
we're modifying, we're providing a waiver.
Waiver
Well, but that's,
14 days.
but we haven't taken up the subject of the treatment.
We take the report request.
Say again?
The waiver would come at the time they request for treatment.
Not right now.
Right. So let's
That's why we don't have.
It is right now.
let's go to the agenda item.
All right, so let,
There's no reason to don't vote.
that's a good point, Richard. So let's move to the agenda item for treatment of Lake
Can
Shirley.
we, Mr. Chairman, can we finish this and just,
We're trying to, Jack.
okay, before we go into the issue of wavering?
All right,
Mr. Chairman,
Bob.
are you saying you want to stop talking about the Lake Shirley order conditions?
Yes.
Why?
Because it's already voted on.
So the only change we're going to make, which we're going to consider after this agenda item for the LSI treatment of Lake Shirley, is that we're going to waive the requirement for the 14-day reporting this year prior to treatment.
When we get to it.
When we get to it.
Yeah, so why don't we just close this out? It's
closed.
It's closed, we're not going to vote. We don't need to vote. We're not
No,
gonna-
you won.
Well, I don't think anybody won here.
No, I, no.
Yeah.
No.
So we're not changing, okay.
So we're not changing.
There's no need for vote, okay.
Good. So,
Mr. Chairman.
item 3 is continued review of regulations. We're going to table that for now.
Yeah.
We're going to move on to the LSIC treatment of Lake Shirley. So, everyone has in front of them Solitude's proposed treatment areas. Dominic, are you still there? You didn't crash or anything, did you?
I'm still there.
Can you, based on your recollection, provide a brief overview of your proposed treatment of Lake Shirley this year?
I know everybody got one.
So then we went through, sampled the 64 or so points around the lake. basically recorded the species that were found at each point and recorded a density and biomass index. So basically what I did was plotted those points on a map. Any point that had a greater than a 3 or greater biomass or density index, is shown on the map as the green, I believe they're triangles. I don't have the map in front of me right now. And also any point that had an invasive species, like there wasn't any no-flows, but it was all curly pondweed. Then using the points that were left on the map, basically constructed treatment areas around those points, and came up with a total of about 77 acres. I think the one thing I will say is that if when we're out there, we'll decide whether we'll use the diquat herbicide or a diquat and copper combination. Primarily, if it's areas that are dominated by tape grass, we would use a combination. If it's other species, naiad, bladderwort, it would be just the diquat, and or curly pond, it would be just the diquat. We did come across any areas that were clearly fanwort dominated, which we currently are not managing in the lake. And it's apparent that there was really no other species of concern in those areas. We would not treat those areas. We would revise the map and show the commission what was ended up being treated.
Questions from the commissioners for Dominic?
Just,
And bear in mind, Dominic's driving, so he's got to do this from memory.
Talking. I hope it's hands-free, Dominic. Do we have this electronically? Because there's no prayer of being able to read this.
Right.
I emailed it to you this afternoon, so it should be in your email.
I didn't get it.
All right, I'll resend it.
Is it an extended Excel sheet that we can blow up and look at and do the comparisons with?
For tonight, I think we want to get to a place that we can let them treat. But
I guess before you ask questions, I had one more suggestion. The survey was done a fair time ago.
Oh, no, what was the date of the survey, Dominic?
It was actually almost exactly a month ago.
June 17th.
And what's the date he sent it to me?
We'd like some discretion.
July 16th.
We've come across areas that are obviously problematic, popped out plants, that sort of thing that we would be able to, and we're going to try to get out there either Friday or Monday to see if we can take another look before the treatment, and at what case we could revise the map slightly, but it would be clearly areas to be added would have to be clearly problematic, popped out plants, clearly a nuisance area to be added. So I would hope the commission wouldn't have an issue with that. I think we did something somewhat similar last year. We were able to make some field decisions, both treating and not treating areas that were on the map. So I think that worked out pretty well last year. Hopefully we can do something similar this year.
Right, because the survey was done 4 weeks ago. So, and you want to do 77 acres, and I believe that there might be a possibility of more due to a whole nother month of growth. But that's something you would, I don't know, that's not my, so if you sent an updated map and they had, the commission themselves had any questions, you could look at them at those points.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead, Carl.
Not being able to see the data, I see the areas, but I can't tell which species were identified in which areas. But I do know that this was, because I saw Dominic's people out on the lake on the day of the survey, so I do know they were there in that date. I also know that there was a significant, what's the, curly leaf pondweed explosion, particularly in one cove that you sent pictures to us of. And I've got the same pictures from that time frame. By the beginning of July, that cove is clean. If anyone goes in there now, there isn't barely a curly leaf pondweed in it now. So I don't know, and that area is being treated. So without seeing the data, I can't tell. And Dominique, you'll look at it, and I trust you. So this area here. But things have changed, to your point. So there are areas that may have been...
Since June, obviously, if we get to that treatment area, we will check each treatment area prior to the application. If the plant that caused it to be on the map in the first place are not there any longer, curly pondweed specifically, then we would obviously not want to treat that area, not spend the outside money.
Dominic,
herbicide to that area, but on the opposite side, there could very well be some areas that have increased in biomass since the last.
so Dominic, you're requesting, much like was approved last year, some discretion to reduce and/or increase in some areas based on your site observations when you go out to treat.
So, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to, I understand, and given the situation that we're put in here with the timeline, that we have to have more flexibility than normal. And I trust Dominic will look. I think last year when he looked, he maybe, did see a couple areas he didn't feel he had to treat. My other concern, though, and Dominic, we talked about this last year, there's a particular area along the peninsula where I and Ms. Bellata have residences, that the backside has a lot of fan work. And I'm very concerned.
The backside meaning the east side? The
east side, yes.
Yep.
The side that's recommended for treatment along the whole peninsula.
Yep.
And there's fan work all along that peninsula. My concern is that if we treat areas with fan work, the chemicals don't touch the fan work. All they're going to do is affect the mostly native species in that area and create a better environment for the fan work to flourish by reducing the competition. So if you could consider that when you relook at these areas, Dominic,
Yeah, I think I actually already mentioned that. I mean, if we go to an area that's clearly dominated by fan work, then that would be an area that I would not treat. If there's no problematic native species, if it's really just problematic because of the fan work, then that area would not need to be treated.
Right, we'd have to come back to the board and ask their approval for Clipper.
Yes, that's for sure. So my last request would be, if they do get back down and take a look Monday, Tuesday, if a member of the commission could go along, since we have to have so much latitude and there's a learning experience also.
I think we did that last year too, didn't we?
Yeah, a couple of years ago, I think maybe it was.
I think that's a reasonable, no?
Well, it all depends who the member is.
Any volunteers?
If you matter yourself, Kim would like to go, Bob, absolutely.
Maybe we could send our agent.
Matt, would you be available?
Yeah, I'll make myself.
So our agent will be available. Good. All right.
So we could only the agent.
Someone coming out with us, I can coordinate with him then.
Yes, please do.
Okay.
Right, we're all clear, it's only Matt.
Correct. So with that, is there any other comments from the public? I'm getting there. I wanted to see if anyone had anything else to say.
Just one question. Dominic, did you ever provide us with a final report as to what you did treat and what you did not treat last year? You did not.
That should have all been in the 2018 year report.
Yeah.
It was like December 20th.
Yeah, it was included in that?
Okay. So I will accept a motion to grant a waiver to the order of conditions to eliminate the 14-day period.
So moved.
Second.
Motion second, roll call vote. Richard Bursch. That was an aye if no one could hear it. Katie Childs.
Aye.
Jack Rabbit.
Aye.
Ken Jones. Aye. Carl Luck.
Aye.
Bob Pease.
Aye.
I vote aye as well. And now I will accept a motion to approve the proposed treatment for July 25th as submitted by Solitude, with the discretion that Solitude will have the ability, based on their relook at the proposed treatment areas, to increase or decrease as necessary within his professional discretion.
Mr. Chairman, as long as he is in agreement with our agent is in agreement with his observations, specifically the counts, the 3s, the 2s. I can't read any of this, but I'd be interested in...
That's why we're having Matt go along with it.
Right, so in the event that Matt disagrees, what happens? He's usually a pretty reasonable guy, you know.
I don't think they disagree.
I make the motion that was requested by the chairman.
Do we have a motion? Do we have a second?
Second.
Motion, second. Roll call vote. Richard Bursch.
Unfortunately, you didn't ask for any discussion from the board once the motion was seconded. I would like Jack to get an answer for his question as far as what happens if there is a discrepancy on the vote between Matt and Solitude.
Dominic, what's your thought on that?
I would say we would defer to Matt. I mean, I think him and I have a pretty good working relationship. I'm sure we can figure this all out. I'm sure we can come to an agreement.
I'm good with that. So, we're ready for a roll call vote without any additional comment?
Yeah, the only other thing I just would recommend to commissioners, and maybe I didn't hear it, do we have a planned treatment date yet?
Yes, July 25th, next Thursday.
Okay. And if there are any areas of concern, just make sure to deal singly with Matt and just make him aware of your concern so he can take a look when they're out there on the 25th.
Very good. Thank you, Richard. So now I'll take a roll call vote.
Aye.
Katie Childs. Bob Pease.
Aye.
Carl Luck.
Aye.
Ken Jones.
No.
Jack Rabbit.
Aye.
And I vote aye as well. So that concludes.
You want to talk about Billfoil, FM Warren Clipper?
You want to talk about what, Joanna?
Well, weed control's on the agenda. Fan war and Clipper.
Okay.
That was something, if we want to use Clipper for fan war, maybe that peninsula could be an area that we could, for this year, try, see the effect, see how it works. I believe Hickory Hills used that in their boat ramp last year.
Right, we sealed it
So
off.
you know the readings, you know you approved it in that lake, so maybe we just try that one strip of peninsula on the fan war and see how Lake Shirley takes to it. Huh?
Mr. Chairman?
Said, I don't think that's unreasonable.
Yep. Carl?
I think it's a good suggestion. I think we made that a couple of years ago, that identify a sample area to maybe just do that, because that's a very big leap in the level of chemicals and risks. So it's not something that should be taken lightly. That's a very different chemical than we're used to, and it has issues. I think it's a great suggestion. I think we should work towards that for next year. I think it's a lot more discussion than to sit here tonight and just say, because Hickory Hills, we put through a lot of work when they went to that chemical. They isolated areas, they tested wells. So I think this is a big subject, because this is and I think the people need to understand what this chemical is. So it deserves more than just...
Hold on, Jack. I think personally, Carl, what you're saying is you're open to it, but not this year.
My idea 2 years ago.
Yeah. So I tend to agree with Carl.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, just to describe the situation in which it was used, there was a...
On Hickory Hills, to
on Hickory
clarify.
Hills, yes, thank you. Essentially, small area, it was essentially the inlet, the boat ramp.
Right.
We closed it off, we used pellets, we dropped them, and we put benthic barriers on top of them. It's not the same application process that you used, and it had some mixed results in that regard. It's not the end-all, be-all. And Dominic, there's a limit with regard to how much of your lake area you can treat in a single year. Is that for all the chemicals, or is that just one type of chemical? I'm not clear on that part.
That's Clipper is restricted to a maximum of a quarter of the lake area in any
Right,
one
okay.
year.
And it doesn't include any of the other chemicals that are being applied? So they're outside of it, okay. It's nasty stuff.
So that's why I just wanted to do the one strip on the peninsula. It's a vacant, it's,
Oh, it's a good idea. It just needs more thought.
that's what we said 2 years ago.
Yeah, so in terms of the, yes, sir. Can you come up and speak to the microphone?
You will have a map?
There you go.
Okay.
You will have a, well, I didn't share this, I just got,
I have a, my lawn sprinkler system. And I'll be leaving Friday. And the treating Thursday. Okay?
Yeah.
And,
yeah, nobody has, I just got this from Dominic yesterday. I just got the report from Dominic, and I didn't want to share it, that everybody heard we were treating. If our conversations today didn't go well, I didn't want people on the lake in a chaos that we were treating, and then I came here 24 hours later and they say no. So, nobody has seen this except Todd at 4 o'clock.
I just want to know if that will affect my,
Yes, it will.
Yeah,
Yes,
they
it will.
recommend no application for 7 days, nothing on,
5.
you know, 5?
5.
5 now? Okay, in meantime, they tell humans they can drink it a day later.
It's 5
Which is
days,
crazy.
not 7. Don't say 7.
All right. So, the last item under the open meeting law remediation is to also talk about the continued review of regulations. Yes, ma'am.
Oh, come on.
I just want to say.
Okay. And thank you very much. We really appreciate it.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming. Thank you for being here.
I can tell.
Thank you.
Good. I'm glad you came.
Thanks.
Good
job.
Thank you. Good night.
Not done yet.
Come on, Dory, get your going. Much conservation is like impossible.
So much.
I got all terms worth of
I'm glad you came, Tom.
Thank you.
Oh, come on, you don't want to stay till the end?
Well, regulations are really my thing, of course, but I mean, I really have to buy miles. Thanks, everyone.
All right, thank you.
Do we want to hear from an attorney? Closing
Essentially, on the
remarks?
regulations, we discussed the administrative determination process.
Yes. Because we don't have them in front of us, I don't have an appetite to reconsider that motion without them in front of us again.
Which motion?
For the,
Regulation.
because we concluded our regulation review, if I recall, on the 29th.
And so to
was this
me, the
form?
only thing
Oh,
we
okay.
have to do, from my point of view, at this juncture, is to take and agree that we're gonna have a public hearing at our televised meeting in August, and again at our televised meeting in September.
But didn't we vote? We voted that night.
And we voted that night.
It's not a valid vote.
And it's not a
Right, it's
valid
not a
vote.
valid-
Right.
And so I think we need to take that re-vote tonight, and we should.
Right.
Then I will accept a motion.
And Mr. Chairman, if I could, before you
Yes.
do, to the extent that there was a discussion had, and there was a bit of a discussion had, you essentially need to recreate what you did after the meeting adjourned but didn't. So you don't need to recreate it verbatim, but you need to say a few sentences as to, okay, on the night of May 29th, after we ordered residents out of the meeting, the discussion included A, B, C, D, E, we took a vote, we're now going to take a revote. So just a brief statement like that, it can be 3 or 4 sentences.
Go back and listen to the video again.
My thought is that we use this remedial action, we continue it to the next meeting, and that's when we do the remedial action for this, if that's acceptable.
Well, the challenge with that is that your deadline is extended through Friday to respond to the open meeting law complaints.
All right, then let's dig in right now.
Bob's pulling out his
I hate to
phone,
tell
we're
you.
gonna do it. Because my memory is shot.
Adam,
Yes.
is there any way you could send me copies of everything you handed out this evening?
Yes, and I apologize. I knew that you'd be participating remotely, and I didn't get you that in advance. Otherwise, I would have. But I can send you the 4 letters.
Just so I have them on file, yeah, I have no concerns in your work product, so I wasn't worried about what you presented. I just want to have copies of them, that's all.
I appreciate that. I'll send you copies tomorrow.
So if memory serves me correctly, we reviewed the agent's determination form, agreed on a format, which is the sheet that we have here. And we were going to do open hearings on the clean copies that I've since generated on the regulation revisions.
So, for the record, why don't you provide a brief description of
The conservation administrative determination is limited to top dressing of loam, fence repair only, septic test holes, limbing of tree to ensure crown remains, some plantings, like lawn plantings, shrubs, new wells over 50 feet, and the removal of dead trees. So the way the process would work is I would work with the property owner, inspect the property, fill out this form, bring it here to the commission to vote on to ratify at the next meeting. The commission ratifies it, person's all set, they meet the exemption criteria. If the commission doesn't ratify it, they have to file either an RDA or an NOI. It's essentially an abbreviated process that allows people to do projects within the buffer zone that either meet the state small project criteria, or it's just too small for us to make them pay all those legal fees, and, legal ad fees and permit fees. It's just too small.
So, based on this, because we all like this form, and we think it should move forward, we need to have 2 televised meetings where we discuss this.
And the rest of the regulations.
And the rest of the regulations.
So we're going to
So what we
include that.
did at at that meeting on the 29th.
Yep.
Is what we did is at a prior meeting, you guys had delegated, almost a year before then, you guys had delegated, Carl and I, to sit with Matt and go through the regulations. And we had done that, okay? And Matt had then taken and generated a list of follow-up items. And Matt then went and was to talk to the town attorney about that.
Which I did.
And he did. And Matt then turned around and sent generated an email to Carl, which I then brought to the meeting, shared with everybody, okay? And we then went through...
Right about this point, Bob, or I told you to just tell us what the changes were.
I'm sorry, Richard, I didn't hear what you said.
He's giving you the business.
I said this was the point in the meeting where I told you to just tell us what your changes were.
Exactly. That's right. And Richard just said, tell us what the changes were. And we went through, and we had very few changes. We authorized Matt to take and develop a final draft, both a clean copy and a red line copy, and we said we would post both the clean copy and the red line copy on the website, and that we would have 2 public hearings, and back then that would be televised, and back then that we said it was going to be in July and August, but now we would have to say they would be in August and September. And so I think all we have to do tonight is move to have those hearings in August and September.
I agree. Will you make that a motion?
I so move that we have a public hearing in August and September on revised regulations based on the clean copy of the regulation revisions and the red line copy showing what the changes were as produced by our agent as authorized by the commission.
We have a motion.
Second.
And a second. Roll call vote. Richard Birch. Aye. Katie Childs.
Aye.
Bob Pease.
Aye.
Carl Luck.
Aye.
Ken Jones.
Aye.
Jack Rabbit.
Aye.
I vote aye as well. And the last piece that we need to discuss is the proposed land donation at 351 Leominster Road.
Well, that's not part of the piece, that's just a new business general item.
Oh, it is? All right.
I have a certificate of compliance in this pile for an old order of conditions at 369.
Hold on just 1 second. So for the record, our open meeting law remediation is now complete, correct, Adam?
That's correct.
All right, thank you.
We passed you.
Thank you for your excellent work, Attorney Costa.
Thank you very much.
Well done, Ed. Thank you.
Yeah.
So essentially, the gentleman that is requesting the certificate of compliance has a lot next door to 369 Leominster Road, which abuts the Woodruff Conservation Area. It's a 2-acre piece. It's, you know, the houses on Leominster Road that are the 2 houses that are on the slope? Right across from Sunny Hill Road?
Yeah, the
Oh, right, that's Sunny Hill Road.
Yeah.
He brought this up before. He wanted to give it to us before, and we decided against it because it's not usable land.
It's not usable land, but it's a 2-acre piece. And it abuts right up. I just thought it made it good.
Now, that Woodruff land isn't even under our control.
No.
Thank you.
Good night, Ed.
I wouldn't be in
God's sake.
favor of it.
So what's in it for the town?
Can't hear you. Adam.
It's up, right? Yeah, it's up full.
He's just not near his microphone.
I'm just not near it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's better.
Think of it like a wine
Thank you.
glass.
All right, so I'll tell him, go to the selectmen.
Yep.
Okay.
So, old business, work at small town forest updates. Matt?
The small town forest thing, this also ties in with the ADA grant. All that work on the town forest, the lane property, and the Cowdrey is complete.
Looks fantastic, too.
Yeah, it came out awesome. They did a great job, and the state has formally approved it and is giving us our money back.
Excellent.
So
Great.
we're in great shape.
Nice.
Hollis Road, any updates on the conservation area?
Our forest cutting plan. Sorry, Rob, sorry, people. Hey, I can be silly, it's almost 11. Anyway, our forest stewardship plan for Hollis Road with the bird habitat has been approved by the state forester. And the grant money for that has been paid to Gary for his services.
Nice.
That's great. More good news.
All right, land acquisition updates? Any?
It's going forward, the grant application was submitted, and so we're sort of in a holding pattern.
Now, was that with the 20,000 or whatever that number was? Weren't we matching?
The money that, well, there's a land grant that we applied for. And we had to put money down for the appraisal.
So are we encumbering that amount right now, Bob?
Some of the money was gonna come out of the trust funds, and then some of it was gonna come out of the forestry. Matt was working with the town.
Usually some sort of encumbrance would be put, if you're just following the accounting rules, if it's been committed in some, even though...
That money's been spent.
Twin City Baptist file?
It's already been spent, so we emptied the coffers to do it, and we might get some money.
That money we're not getting back. That's non-reimbursable. And that was, when we made the motion, that was
Yeah, I
explained.
didn't understand. I thought if we didn't get it, we got it.
No. That money is money that we spent.
Determination for 320 Burridge.
All right, we have no extension permits tonight.
Thank you.
What did we sign?
Has everyone looked at the minutes from the last meeting?
No.
Certificates of compliance are duplicates for Twin City Baptist. It's in old order.
So do we want to table approving the minutes till next meeting? Okay, good.
Good, I didn't
Last
get a
meeting that
chance.
we need to approve today.
I sent you the ones from the last meeting this
I
afternoon.
thought there was another one that.
Okay, I think,
the 29th of May, actually.
Jack, you gave us
Okay.
our stormwater committee report earlier.
I did.
Any other committee reports, I think?
I haven't.
I think
That's
not,
enough.
right?
That's the
Okay.
positive determination for Burridge Street. This is the negative determination for the Pleasant Street septic system.
Is it just one?
Any other things you want to tell us, Matt, tonight, before we finish signing and adjourn?
If I could just compliment Heather, and for that matter, Phyllis, for doing a tremendous amount of work to move these quotes forward. They're saving the town some money. It's a really good effort. It's solid.
On stormwater?
On stormwater, to both Heather and to Phyllis. Good job.
Duplicate copies of certificate of compliance for the house on Leominster Road. I have the as-built on that one from Steve Mulaney.
Bob?
One, I'd like to compliment the vice chair on his job tonight.
Here, here.
Two, I'd just like to advise everybody that even though the state, had a ceremony and everything saying that the grant had been awarded for trails, it hasn't really. It's still in federal review. The danger in federal review is if they take and they can say we need archaeological review in order to dig those post holes out there, that it costs like 8 to 10 grand for an archaeological review.
Give me a bag of shells.
And so we can't count those chickens until they hatch, kind of thing.
I know an archaeologist at work. I could see if she does side work for cheap.
So,
Serious.
So the grant's not real yet, but I will be reaching out to some people who've already volunteered to help. When we actually get the grant, I intend to write a series of newspaper articles, soliciting people, to help.
Thanks, Carl.
And so it goes. And also, I just want to mention again that we look for people to use trail forks, to map the trails.
What is the app? Trail forks?
Trail forks.
What's the second one?
Trail forks. F-O-R-K-S.
One thing I want to mention, Matt, when you type up the agenda, can you stop leaving out and the Lunenburg Wetland Protection and Municipal Bylaw, because it screws me up whenever I have to read it.
Yeah, I know, Rich already said
It wasn't there at the last meeting, and I was just kind of running it off of my memory.
Thank you for the public
Thinking it was just
humiliation.
a one-shot
I know you're
deal.
telling me this because he texted you to tell me.
No, it's because it screws me up every meeting.
Humiliation.
All right, with that, I will accept a motion to adjourn this meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Here we go.
Roll call vote. Richard?
If I might, before everybody gets up, if I could, I want to thank each and every one of you. I received a card last weekend that you had made a contribution in my father's name to the Parkinson Foundation. And on behalf of my family and myself, thank you very, very much.
Our pleasure. At least we
Very
could do it.
gracious offer or gift. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Rich. Can we go home now? You vote aye?
I vote aye.
Katie?
Aye.
Jack?
Aye.
Ken?
Aye.
Carl? Aye.
I said no.
You guys know.
Hey, is this the inside of your can?